I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Bob Marks.
Welcome to the Games Live, a live stream election coverage of campaign 2024. We're going to be on until 11 o'clock tonight. We're going to be interviewing many of the candidates who are running, a lot of elected officials. We'll have some political analysis. And as the evening unfolds, we will review the results of the leading races, and in some cases, even the not so leading races. Bob, we've been doing this for a number of years, haven't we?
Yeah, we really have. I was thinking back, the first election that I was involved in was in 1974 in Oregon. I was the Jackson County chair for Betty Roberts, who was running for the U.S. Senate, a Democrat. She was running against Bob Packwood. And so, Mark, you can guess who won that race. But ever since then, it seems I've been involved in every election in one way or another. How about you?
Well, pretty much. I mean, I grew up in a political household. My mother was actually very active in Democratic politics. Was very close to people like Leo Ryan. I like to tell people I came home from school one day in the fourth grade, and Leo Ryan was holding a candidate's coffee in my front room, and I went off in search of a snack. But ever since then, I've been around politics, and then I started actually covering political campaigns for the first time in 1976. And I've covered virtually every local, state, and regional campaign, and many presidential races, Senate races, governor races. So we've been doing this a long time. And then you and I have been doing this together. I've lost track of when we started. We actually started off, I think, in the old Foster City Council chamber. So
yeah, I think we've been doing it for 20 years or almost 20 years. So here we are, one more night, and this one may be the most exciting race, the most consequential race that we've ever seen.
Yeah. Well, we've seen some early results. We're going to get the first tranche of results sometime after 8:10, right around then. And then I'm told we'll get another slug of them around 9 o'clock. But we should see a good number of the votes that have been cast, either by mail or even the ones that are cast today will be counted before the end of today. I think probably after we go off the air. But we're happy to have a number of guests on, including right now, Congressman Kevin Mullin is in the studio waiting for us to bring him in. I'm getting tired, Kevin, of the phrase too early to call or too close to call. It looks as though Harris is holding the blue wall, but it's really hard to calculate what's going on. What is your feel for what's going on?
You know what? I wish I had more for you in a definitive way, Mark, but I am waiting just like the rest of America for results in the so-called blue wall, the Great Lakes region. I think, and you can see the Californians for Harris Walls sign behind me, not hiding who I'm supporting as a Democrat, proud to represent the 15th congressional district. But there was some talk of some other paths available to the magic number of 270 for Kamala Harris. It looks like that is a shrinking hope in terms of Georgia and Arizona, North Carolina, some of the other states that were bandied about as possible pickups. Even Iowa with that Des Moines Register poll that showed Kamala Harris ahead. Appears that was something of an outlier of a poll. So there's a little bit of false hope there that we could put aside. This is going to come down to can Kamala Harris win Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. That has been the focus of the media, certainly the focus of both campaigns. And it's, I know you don't like the phrase, Mark, but it truly is too early to call. I'm glued a little too much, I think, to Twitter. I understand that Nate Silver, one of these master prognosticators, is putting that slightly in the Harris column at this point. But, look, I try to tamp down the anxiety and tell myself that this is exciting. I try to tell myself that this is what elections are all about. But it is not for the faint of heart when you're talking about our democracy, the small d Democratic Republic as we've known it. sort of the traditions, belief in institutions in this country, the peaceful transfer of power, the rule of law, this constitutional republic we have for ourselves, very much hanging in the balance here as we talk this evening. So I wish I had more definitive information for you. I'm afraid I'm watching it like the rest of America, and as you might imagine, with bated breath.
Yeah. I think one thing we can all agree upon, the one thing worse than Donald Trump winning the presidency is if he were to have both houses of Congress. What's your take? It looks like the Republicans are going to, have 51 votes and the Senate could be up to 54. What's your take about the House?
Yeah, so just on that score, Bob, I think there was generally an understanding that the Senate was going to be Republican, that just the way the map broke down, which states had Senate seats up, that it was really going to be difficult for Democrats to maintain control of the Senate. So it really comes down to the House, and one of the crystal ball genius prognosticators, Larry Sabato, University of Virginia, projected that the Democrats would have the majority by one vote, 218.
Wow.
218 on the nose. Now, he has access to more data and has sort of an independent view of the way these House races are going to go state by state. I have something of a biased view. I've been working in California. We have about 6 seats that are in play. We're certainly hoping to flip at least a couple of those seats from red to blue. The path to the House majority really runs through California and New York primarily, although I've heard a couple of reports from some other states, some positive information. So it is so early. I can't give you any kind of a prognostication or prediction on that one. We know that in California, and if it does indeed come down to California, which that could very well be the case, we're talking about signature verification. We're talking about the curing of ballots. We are in a vote center, all vote by mail state. Proudly, I should say, we make it easier to vote in California than we do anywhere in America. But because of the participation levels and just the volume of votes, we're talking about weeks and weeks potentially before we know the outcome of those purple seats in California. But we, as Democrats, need to pick up 4 seats total, which is a small number. If you were talking about something of a wave election, this is not a wave election, right? This is a 50-50 country. And when you look at it seat by seat, those poll numbers and all those seats, those purple seats, were super tight going into election. So even if Democrats prevail, I can't imagine, honestly, it being more than a 2 or 3 seat majority, which would mean we would pick up, 6 or 7 seats across the country. Just as a member of Congress, I sort of pause a little bit and think about, what if we get this majority by 1 vote? Yeah. And you are talking about, if you think they were serious about attendance before, I think they put one of those apps on my phone to check my whereabouts at all times to make sure I'm close to the floor to cast votes. But we'll see. There may be a little bit of a brewing wave out there that I'm not detecting, but I suspect it's either going to be Republicans retaining the House by the slimmest of margins, or Democrats take control of the House, again, by the slimmest of margins. It's very much a 50-50 country with all the gerrymandering and sort of safe seats on both sides. You're talking about an ever-shrinking number of seats in the middle where the battle for control is really fought.
One of the characteristics of our 50-50 country is the almost sort of astonishing conviction on each side that a win by the other side will be a disaster for the country. Is there any solace to be taken in? I mean, you've been in government a long time. You're still, and by the way, without seeing the results, I think we can probably congratulate you on your reelection to a second term. But is there any reason to think that the deadlock will continue to essentially stymie anybody from getting much done, whether it's the stuff that people are alarmed about Trump or even the things that people say alarm them about Kamala Harris. I just wonder, is there really, are we going to be just sort of deadlocked and narrowly divided for the foreseeable future? Or do you see some prospect that stuff will get done? What are the issues around which your colleagues, for example, can coalesce? I mean, usually it's bringing money back to the district, but even that doesn't seem to fly the way it used to.
Yeah, so there's a lot there with that question mark. I'll try to be relative
as much as possible.
So I'm an optimist by nature. In fact, going into Congress, I was actually sort of hopeful that a narrowly divided chamber would sort of force cooperation between the parties. And to some degree, that actually has happened in the sense that Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican who controls the gavels at the moment, had to deal with some very extreme members of his caucus, the Freedom Caucus. So on occasion, he wouldn't advertise this to the world, but he would turn to Democrats essentially to help move business forward in the House. And although we've not agreed on a spending plan for the fiscal year, we have passed in a bipartisan way a number of these concurrent resolutions. I don't want to get too deep into the minutia of Congress here, but there have been moments of bipartisan cooperation, and that has given me some optimism and some hope that we can work together across the aisle. I've talked a little bit about this, but I'm inviting one of my very conservative Republican colleagues from California to my district, a gentleman named Jay Obernolte, and then he's going to return the favor. I'm going to visit his district. We need to take baby steps as a California delegation to work across the aisle. Here's what I do know. The way things are working with the pitched partisan battle is not in service of the country. There are too many big challenges that aren't seeing enough progress the way the House is run right now. But I can't really have this conversation, honestly, without knowing who will be occupying the Oval Office. If it is Donald Trump and the Democrats take a slim majority, we will see ourselves as a defender of democracy. We will be defending democracy, the rule of law, this small d democratic republic we have for ourselves, and standing up for institutions against any autocratic moves by a President Trump. If it is Kamala Harris, it is a completely different construct that we have for ourselves in terms of how we approach the job, candidly. So many unanswered questions at this, at least for the West Coast, early hour. In terms of what can be expected, but I would welcome the opportunity to have that conversation when we know who will be occupying the Oval Office, when we know who will be controlling the gavels. No matter what, the status quo isn't working for the broad swaths of the American people who want to see bipartisan progress on so many challenges, on the economy, on workforce, dealing with AI, dealing with climate change, although my Republican colleagues are slow to the conversation on that front. But so many big challenges that need federal government involvement in a positive way are being left to the side because of our political dysfunction. And if I'm going to continue to serve there, and I'd be honored to do that if I am reelected tonight, I've got to know that we can work together and we can make positive progress. Otherwise, we continue to spin our wheels to the detriment of the American people. So the status quo is unacceptable, regardless of the outcomes tonight.
Well, the good news is, since you've come on the air, we've gotten results. 40% of the vote is in, and you have almost 75% of the vote to your opponent, which is 25.26. So I think we can now safely say that you've been reelected. So congratulations.
Thank you. thank you
Yeah.
for that. And I'm grateful to the people of the 15th Congressional District for this enormous opportunity, regardless of the challenges that I just outlaid there. It is the honor of my life. And thank you for having me on to be able to express that to the public.
Okay, we're hoping to have you on again later, if that's
Yep.
okay, when we know a little more. We're kind of open-ended here because of the nature of our format. So if you feel so inclined, call in when you feel like a little more comfortable about where things are, or uncomfortable about where things
You
are.
got it. I will. And that may be after a couple of glasses of wine.
Yeah.
So just, that's just an advisory that's a programming advisory, but I'll check back in a little bit later this evening.
Well, I think a lot
Okay.
are taking the approach, it's the line from an Animal House. I suggest you start drinking.
All right. I'll check back in a bit.
Thanks,
Good.
Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
While we're waiting to hear from our next guest, Bob, what's your feel? It's still all very much up in the air, I guess, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'd rather be in the former president's position than I would in the vice president's position at this point. But there's nothing definitive. There are some outlets that have called Georgia and North Carolina, but none of the major networks that I'm aware of have called it. One of the things from AP, which caught my attention, is they are projecting nationwide that Trump is going to win 23% of the Black male vote. If in fact that's correct, that's a really ominous sign for Kamala Harris.
So listen, while we're waiting for our next guest, we're hoping to have Jim Irizarry from the County Elections Department. We do have local results, and I think it's worth at least talking about them a little bit. We're going to start with some things that are no surprise. San Mateo County has gone for Kamala Harris, 75.3% of the vote. Donald Trump, 22.8%. The only interesting thing about that is Republican registration in the county is about 14.5%. So he's running about 8 points ahead of registration, but it's still 22%. And as you know as well as I do, in most elections, anybody can get 30 to 35% of the vote. So this is just clearly an entirely blue county, as the chart we just put up shows. U.S. Senate, Adam Schiff, also at about 75%. I don't know if I saw Steve Garvey do anything in the campaign. Not State Senator Frank, U.S. Senator. There you go.
Yeah.
And we mentioned Kevin is at 74.7%. So he's we in the seat he's in is the seat that Jackie Speier represented, and you always wondered, she routinely got 70% of the vote or more, and he is matching that, which makes me think it's as much about the district and how they tend to vote than it might be anything else. State Senator Josh Becker, reelected with about 75% of the vote. So the Democrats here are doing very, very well. Diane Pappin, 75% of the vote. So there's a real key sort of indicator here that that's just how Democrats vote here. And then even among the largest registration is the Democrats are 56%. No party preference is about 30, and the Republicans are 14. So the Democrats are also running 20 points ahead of their registration. Some of the local seats that we're looking at in Millbrae, Reuben Holliver, who was off the council because they redrew the districts, is getting 70% of the vote over Yo-Yo Wei, who ran 2 years ago and is running again. In Redwood City, the race between Isabella Eshoo and incumbent Lisette Espinoza-Garnica, somewhat controversial figure who they said they were a socialist. 52% for Eshoo, 48% for Espinoza-Garnica, but it's a very small number of votes, barely over 1,200 votes.
Mark, That is, I think, one of the races we're going to watch carefully,
Yes.
because it's one of two races in the county where you have a ultra progressive candidate running for office, the other being in South San Francisco. So it'll be interesting to watch that throughout the night.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's one of the races where the progressives, Lisette Espinoza Garnica is one of the high profile progressives in the county, along with James Coleman. James is more in a leadership position. Lisette's more of a sole proprietorship, if you will. But that's very interesting. In the other Redwood City race, Marcela Padilla, Parks and Rec Commissioner, endorsed by 4 of the members of the council, versus Diana Reddy. And that race is very close right now. There's more than 3,300 votes that have been counted already. But Diana Reddy was on the council. They redid the redistricting and renumbered her seat so that she was no longer in office. She just simply couldn't run for re-election. So now she is trying to make a comeback. And as I mentioned, 4 of the people she served with on that council endorsed Marcela Padilla. So that's pretty interesting. You mentioned South San Francisco. Well, let's go to city of San Mateo first, because one of the high profile races there, also a race where you could say it's a progressive versus an establishment kind of person. Nicole Fernandez versus Charles Hanson, who was endorsed by the outgoing incumbent Amarance Lee, who's opted not to run for re-election. Nicole Fernandez right now has 70% of the vote. And looks like there's no reason to think she's not going to be on her way to winning. In South City, the 2 incumbents, Mark Nagales and James Coleman, were challenged by respectively Vivian Ramos and Alvin Sharma, and more significantly, perhaps, longtime political power broker in South City, Carol Matsumoto, actively recruited the 2 challengers to Coleman and Nagales. But Nagales is at 63% of the vote right now, almost 64, and Coleman is at 66%. So barring some really dramatic change, I mean, the thing to remember, first of all, we don't know how many votes have been cast, but these districts are very small now. And so it's, if somebody's got 66% of the vote and you've got 33, you almost have to flip that equation to even pull even in that kind of a race. So that's sort of the update right now on some of these races. I just got a message from Jim Irizarry that, as he put it, is bonkers right now. So coming here is going to be a challenge. We'll continue to see if we can't get him at some point tonight, but we'll keep working on it. But what's your first reaction to some of these results, either at the national level or at the local level, Bob?
Well, it's certainly interesting at the national level. As we said before, they haven't called the election yet in any of the swing states. So we're just going to have to see how that plays out. When we talk to Kevin about Congress, that certainly is going to be very interesting to watch and very important. I mean, he talked about a 1 vote difference, but the difference is being in the majority or being in the minority. There's a huge difference, but it will be tough to get things done.
One of the questions that occurred to me when he was on is, will the House assert its role as a check and balance on the executive? Because that's one of the things that has been undermined by this. You see, the president issuing executive orders. Obama started it, and it bothered me even then that he was pursuing policies without going through Congress. I am told by Frank, I haven't mentioned Frank Bravo. He's our producer. He's the guy who's making all this happen. And I also was neglectful in not saying that we're sponsored by the San Mateo Daily Journal, the Redwood City Pulse, and the Almanac. I'm told now that we have Jim Irizarry. Jim, thank you so much for taking time out of what we know is a ridiculously busy evening. It's so great to see you. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation. It is an exciting evening.
So give us a sense now of What is the turnout so far, and what do you project as the turnout for the whole election?
Well, we're looking at record numbers with respect to registered voters in San Mateo County. We reached over 444,000 registered voters for this election, which is outpacing the 2020 presidential election, which was over 442,000. So we've set a record there. It appears also we're going to possibly set a record for vote center votes cast, and we'll see those numbers at the end of the evening. So it's been record breaking in those two areas. What we're seeing is a constant steady stream. I think what we're going to see pretty much are numbers that are similar, although we're reluctant to make any predictions. You know, there are a lot of variables in elections, but I think we're looking at, similar numbers to the 2020 election. As of 5 p.m. today, we've received 215,000 vote by mail ballots, and over 33,000 votes have been cast at vote centers. So it's a good night. And the good thing about the voters, they took Mr. Church's advice and voted early, and it's been a steady stream. We haven't experienced long lines at Tower Road, so voters in San Mateo counties are doing their job.
Yeah, I didn't introduce you properly, and I apologize for that. Jim Irizarry is the Assistant Chief Elections Officer. Reports to Mark Church, who is the Chief Elections Officer, along with a number of other responsibilities. 33,000 at the vote center. It sounds like more people are opting. I mean, that sounds like a high number to me. Is it an extraordinary number, or is it pretty much in keeping with what happens?
It is slightly higher than our previous records, and where we're at is, I shouldn't say an extraordinary number, but it is the highest number that we've had of voters casting ballots at vote centers. So that is an important milestone, as it is with our registered voters. So voters in San Mateo County are, very active and involved. It's also reflective of our department's voter education and outreach program, where we're reaching out through community-based organizations to various communities that traditionally have not actively participated in the electoral process. So those efforts are paying off.
Jim, we're seeing across the country in a number of states, there were bomb threats for polling places and election workers. It appears that they originated from Russia. But my question to you is, as a longtime person involved in this process, what do you make of what's going on around the country in terms of the lack of trust by some in the voting process?
Well, it's unfortunate, and what it is a concentrated effort by malicious actors, nation-state actors, and criminals to undermine the confidence in our democratic process by undermining the integrity of elections in the perception of the voter. So that is an objective that we're seeing play out nationally, and you see that through mis and disinformation. Fortunately, in San Mateo County and in California in general, we have a robust cybersecurity program, and we also work cooperatively with our partners, the Department of Homeland Security, the Secretary of State, and we're monitoring this activity every day. And again, San Mateo County is somewhat unique as compared to the rest of the nation. And, we're seeing a pretty stable process here. But again, threats are possible at any time. And, we're not immune to that. But I do believe that, we've got a very solid program here that's helping us manage that pretty good.
Tell us how the rest of the count will unfold. We just got a major tranche of the vote. I think it's about 40%. When will we get the next big slug of ballots, and what kind will they be?
Well, the next count, the rest of this evening, will be as ballots are brought in from the vote center. So we will be counting all of the ballots that were counted at vote centers today, processed at vote centers today. And that will run all the way through the rest of the evening. And we will have all of the ballots that have been voted at a vote center this evening. However, there is a tail to the election process in the state of California. There's a 7-day grace period, of course, for elections, and that is that ballots have to be mailed by election day midnight in order to be valid, and then they have 7 days to be received by Election Central here in San Mateo County, and that's November 12th. So there's a tail to the process. We will see a large number of ballots coming in tomorrow from USPS. We're also, picking up all of our ballots from our ballot drop box locations. So we will see that activity through this week, and we'll see. I think we'll have the majority of our ballots in by the end of the week or so.
Okay, and then there's a 30-day period for certification, right?
The 30-day certification period, yes. Again, that's at the election of our Chief Elections Officer, Mark Church. Jurisdictions can select really any period that they'd like for the most part. 30 days is the maximum. And Mr. Church is elected to do that to provide all voters the maximum period of time to cure their ballots. Unfortunately, many voters don't sign their ballot return envelope, or their signature is illegible. And then there's a ballot curing process. And so we provide voters in San Mateo County 28 days to cure their ballots. And that will be on December 3rd. 2 days before the certification on December 5th. And again, it's a 30-day certification process primarily for that reason.
Jim Irizarry, thank you so much for taking time out of what we know is a busy night to be with us on this show.
Yeah,
it is our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And now we're happy to be joined by John Mays, the editor of the San Mateo Daily Journal, who's also having a busy night. John, we thank you for joining us. We know you've seen what we've seen, which is the first major chunk of ballots. Anything in there that surprises you or that's particularly noteworthy?
Yes. Hold on one second. Sorry about that.
You mean you're actually going to stop and look stuff up instead of just talking off the top of your head? Obviously, you shouldn't even be on this show if that's what you're going to do.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of things that kind of stood out. One is that in Half Moon Bay, Harvey Rohrabach and Joaquin Jimenez seem to be down with their challengers, Paul Nagales and Patrick Bo Johnson. So that's one thing. Another one is that in San Mateo, Nicole Fernandez has about 70% of the vote, which is pretty solid. I would call that one for her. And then Measure T is up pretty substantially as well. So it's nice to see something so solid so quickly for San Mateo. Another one is that.
Well, before you move on, let's talk a little bit about Measure T.
Sure.
This is an effort to remove some of the constraints on height and density development in key parts of the city, largely the most urbanized and dense in parts of the city. The measures that have been passed over the years to restrict height have been almost the holy grail for the backers of that restriction. Are you surprised that the restrictions are being lifted to some degree? I mean, it's not citywide, it designates certain key areas, but to have it win with some relative speaking ease, is that a surprise to you?
Not really, because I think, Measure Y, which was the predecessor, or which is the ballot measure that will be repealed by Measure T, pretty much split the city. And then the city council decided to take this on in the general plan. And in the general plan, they came up with a pretty well vetted by the community plan. Their general plan had to be passed, and the housing element had to be certified by the state. And part of that was what you see in Measure T. So Measure T was sort of, the general plan passed if we pass Measure T. If not, it has to go back to the council to sort of revisit some of the zoning. And the zoning was such that, it made sense for more people. And I think that it was in, near transit centers on El Camino. There was another ballot measure when Measure Y passed, Measure Q, I think. I don't know. I can't remember what it was.
Sure.
But that one had similar footprint, but a very much lacked specificity as to what it would do within that footprint. This one has that specificity, and I think people sort of understood it a little bit better.
John, one of the things that the No on T people were saying is that it's going to cause a tax increase. And while the plan doesn't call for that, the amount of new housing that we're going to see, is our infrastructure to a point where there isn't some truth in the fact that taxes may be raised for everybody in San Mateo?
I don't understand how taxes would be raised by Measure T or new development. I mean, new development. I mean, look at, in other areas of the country where there's new development. I mean, Redwood City had more density and heights downtown, but taxes weren't raised for that.
Right.
I never quite understood that argument that it would raise taxes because I think development kind of pays for itself in a certain way. Of course, there's a lot of fees with that and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't really see that as being a realistic, argument.
Right. Obviously, the voters didn't either.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So tell me, what other races are catching the attention?
Well, another one was in Redwood City is pretty tight with Isabella Eshoo and Lizette Espinosa-Garnica pretty much locked up within 60 votes or so, 52.27% for Isabella and 47.73% for Lizette. And then in District 7, Marcela Padilla has 50.7 and Diana Reddy has 49.3. So those are pretty close and really hard to call at this point. Everything else kind of tracks, makes sense. You have in San Bruno, you have Rico Medina looking like he will win. And that kind of makes sense. He's an incumbent, even though people know Marty Medina. But in that one, you never know if people think that they're voting for one Medina over another, since they're both Medinas. But so that was sort of interesting. And then, of course, in Millbrae, you have Ruben Holliber, who has a commanding lead over Yo-Yo Zwe. And then Stephen Rinaldi has a significant lead as well. But that's not really a surprise, considering what happened recently with the recall.
That's an interesting race to me, only because he was backed heavily by Gina Pappin, who caught quite a bit of flack. Apparently, Mr. Rinaldi is a Republican, so that's noteworthy because it means a Republican will, if the election results hold a city council seat when there have not been many. But the Democratic Party was very angry at Gina Pappin, who's the outgoing council member, for so openly backing a Republican.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could be from Mars, and if you were for the recall and against La Quinta, you would win in Millbrae.
How much of a hangover is there from the recall in Millbrae?
I mean, I think it's it's interesting. I mean, people in Millbrae are serious about this particular issue, and they want their candidate. So Stephen is in.
Yeah. Give us
John, no.
Go ahead, Bob.
We haven't seen the results yet. Maybe there are a number of revenue measures that are on the ballot, business license taxes and things like that.
Yeah, those are all passing.
They're all passing.
Yeah, they're all going to pass.
Yeah.
Give us we know it's a busy night for you, and really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
What's going on in the Daily Journal newsroom?
We're at the point right now where we have a pretty strong indication as to where the races are going. And then some are a little bit tight. So we were waiting anxiously, as Jim just described to you in the last segment, for that next one. So we can kind of get an indication if it's going to swing a certain way with day of voters. It used to be that older people and more conservative people would vote by mail earlier, and then it would be younger people and more progressive people would vote day up. And I'm not sure if that math stays true nowadays. So we're sort of waiting to see what that indication of today's voting, where it'll swing. And so if you start seeing something shifted in a different way or get a little bit more solid, then usually that's the direction. So 9 o'clock, we'll see a direction, and then we'll be able to start calling some of these closer ones, I think. Another one that I thought was kind of interesting, Mark, was the in Belmont with the Davina Hurt and Tom McCune. Tom is pretty good overall against Davina. And I think you had mentioned there was some independent expenditures that were happening from Big Oil in that race. And so that'll be interesting to see sort of how that plays out.
Yeah, that is very interesting. And you're right, it's about 54% for McCune and 33% for Davina Hurt. And it's
Yeah,
important to note they were
that
both
was-
members of the council, and because of redistricting and in district elections, they both ended up in the same district. I know you and I have talked, sort of between ourselves, that it was frustrating because they're both pretty good council members. It was a shame that they had to run against each other, but there you go. And
Yeah.
yeah, the oil companies did spend a substantial amount of money, largely because Davina Hurt has been serving as the San Mateo County representative on a couple of regional air resources board and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And they don't like a couple of the votes that she cast there that were a little hard on the oil companies.
Yeah, it'll be hard to know what the impact of those independent expenditures were on this race, but it has to have some impact.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting though, is even looking at that race, now there are 4 candidates, but you know, the number of votes we're talking about, McCune's got under 1,000 votes. And then you go to another district in another city and the 2 candidates have a combined over 33,000 votes. So it's another factor of district elections to see how huge a variance it is in terms of what it takes to get elected in one district in one city versus another.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, John, thank you for coming in. We appreciate it. Good luck tonight. Hope you make
All right.
deadline.
All right,
And,
thanks. Good luck with the rest of the show. So far, it looks pretty good. Good job, guys.
we look forward to reading all about it in tomorrow's San Mateo Daily Journal.
All right, thanks a lot.
We are now happy to be joined by one candidate we've been talking about, Nicole Fernandez, who is running for the San Mateo City Council against a gentleman named Charles Hanson, and Danielle Cwirko-Godycki, who ran unopposed, never run for office before, ran unopposed. So I think we can say congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you think the results mean in San Mateo. Nicole, since you had an opponent, and your opponent was endorsed by Amarance Lee, the woman who held this seat and opted not to run for re-election. What's your take on this election? And you seem to be winning by a substantial amount. Tell us why.
Yeah, I think that people are just really excited for a cohesive council that gets along and is putting the people first. That's the reason I jumped into this race, is because I really didn't think that we had a council that some members of the council didn't center the people. And I'm really excited that we're going to have a council that gets along, but also advocates for the important issues in San Mateo to make sure that this is a great place to live, play, and work.
Both of you are going to have to deal with $11 million shortfall that the city faces. Talk a little bit about that, how you think it'll be dealt with.
You want to take that one?
Yeah. I mean, we're definitely going to have to all band together and be really strategic and thoughtful about, where we make investments in the future and where we look to, gain funding or, get federal and state grants to offset some of those deficits. As I think, as Nicole mentioned, having a collaborative council that works together and partners is definitely going to be a key. And that's why we're excited about tonight and the outcome. So
it should be noted that Nicole entered the race when it was not clear yet whether Amarance Lee was going to run for re-election. So let's talk about that a little bit, because she certainly raised the profile of the city council because of the dispute between her and Lisa Diaz-Nash over the mayor position. And it ushered in an era of division on the city council that really hadn't existed before. Is that era over? Is that one of the things we can take away from this election, Nicole?
I mean, San Mateo, for the last couple of years, the council has been dysfunction junction. And I'm someone who is really known for being a collaborator and a bridge builder and a consensus builder. And I'm really excited, again, to work on issues on behalf of people and to make sure that we are working in a productive and collaborative way. Collaboration is what it's all about. And I can honestly say I'm fond of every single member of that council. And I know that we are going to be able to be a productive group, especially this one.
You two have been friends for a long time. Danielle, what's your view on this whole division. And was it a brief blip on the history of San Mateo, or is
Yeah.
it something that reflects some divisions in the city?
Yeah, absolutely. We're putting it to bed. Leadership starts at the top. The council, it's our responsibility to show up and show people how to, comport themselves, especially members of the public when they have things to say. And it's our job to set the standard and the tone. And I think one of the things my campaign has been really proud of is we have called out, poor behavior online, and we'll continue to do that because we want to make sure that we're a collaborative community and we're all working together to solve issues constructively. So I echo everything Nicole just said too.
It looks like Measure T is going to pass. Give us your reaction to that, and the fact that you're facing over the next 6 years about 7,000 new housing units that the state mandate requires. Talk a little bit about that issue and Measure T.
I mean, I want to say thank you to everybody who volunteered on this effort, who walked and knocked on doors and got out there and talked to the community about, making sure they understand what are the reasons for and against. And I think this is a big win for San Mateo. We've had 30 years under Measure Y, and this is clearly an indicator that we're headed towards a new future. And I'm really excited about that.
And beyond that, I mean, we are really excited that our general plan gets to stay in compliance. The state will not, the state has approved it conditionally, and hopefully we will get permanent approval, which means that we can make way for new neighbors, and we can make sure that we continue to be the inviting, inclusive city we've always been.
The other issue that's waiting for you is the question of historic districts and essentially preventing development of any kind, any sort of change in the nature of a neighborhood. And frankly, the mayor of your city has been a leading proponent of supporting historic districts. How do you think that's going to play out?
I think that there's a lot that, again, we're just enjoying the night right now. We're enjoying our we have a lot to learn about being council members and, the positions we're going to be taking on important issues like this. So I'm gonna wait until we've been able to adjust to being on the dais and enjoying this moment, and we can talk about that soon when it's in front of us and agendized at the council.
Danielle, are you going to dodge the question too?
Actually,
I think that's the best answer for both of us.
Yeah, I think speed and make sure we're well informed on the topic.
It's an important issue, but we definitely want to make sure that we have as much information as possible on it.
Well, Danielle, Cwirko-Godycki and Nicole Fernandez, congratulations on your
thank you
election, and we will look forward to having you on the game sometime in the near future.
Hopefully together. We travel as a pair.
Okay.
Well, I think we need a spot bigger than a phone booth. It looks like the two of you are pretty crammed in there together.
Yeah, thank
phone
you.
Booths. What are those? Phone booths.
Mark,
Thank you so much. Good to see you. And we are now joined by former State Senator Jerry Hill, former San Mateo City Council member, former Board of Supervisors member, and one of the original co-authors, co-backers of the height limit that has just been modified, it appears, by the voters in San Mateo. Are you surprised by first of all, welcome. Thank you for joining us, Jerry. Are you surprised by the result on Measure T?
No, I'm not. I think that I've supported Measure T, and I was a strong supporter of it because I felt that, in 1991 with Measure H that I championed, helped write, and ran on that for the city council. The time wasn't right for the size or the densities that we saw and in the locations. And now, as we've seen it 35 years later, that things have changed. And my fear is, knowing Sacramento as I do, knowing what they can do when they want to, and knowing that the political will is there to do the things to cities to force housing. I mean, just look at the ADUs that we see around. I mean, a lot of communities and neighborhoods have ADUs popping up in the front of their houses, in the back of them, and in many ways it's intrusive to a neighborhood, and in most cases not necessary, because you can provide that housing by doing what Measure T did, and that is what we were talking about 20 years ago, which is take the Caltrain corridor, take El Camino, take the large transit opportunities and where the workers really are and the jobs are, and provide the housing there for those people. Don't disrupt the communities, the single family neighborhoods that have been in existence for 100 years here, and try to make them something that they're not. And that's what Sacramento would do. And I think the voters realize that because they've seen the impact of those decisions that Sacramento has made.
Jerry, it's good to see you. It's been
Nice
a
to see you,
while.
Bob. It has been.
There seems to be a battle going on between progressives and I'll call them establishment Democrats, kind of an effort to keep San Mateo County from turning into San Francisco South. Do you see that? Do you see that happening? Do you see what's going on? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I do see it going on, and I think that's why we saw a reaction, Danielle running, and obviously successfully, and I think what we saw with her is that she wasn't challenged in this race because she was able to garner a lot of support and endorsements early on, and she represented a more moderate approach, which we were looking for, and I think people recognized that and wanted it. And with the same with Nicole, and in the race that she has. I think, in most things that I've noticed in politics is there's always that pendulum. It goes one way and then goes the other. And I think we're seeing it go the other way because people have watched what many of the strong progressives in our county have been trying to do, and doing it in a way that's forcing it on people and communities, and people aren't happy and they're reacting to it. So I think we'll see more of that as time goes on.
Well, one of the places where this may play out would be on the Board of Supervisors, which you served, and you have said to me more than once, for all the different jobs you had in the state assembly and state senate, you actually thought the job on the Board of Supervisors was the best of the jobs because you had the means by which to affect the local community. But it looks like right now that Lisa Gauthier is easily going to win that seat over Antonio Lopez, a young newcomer who I suspect we have not heard the last from, but that probably fits into Bob's definition of establishment versus really hard charging progressives. What do you see for the Board of Supervisors going forward? You've got David Canepa will actually be the senior member of the board. Obviously, Jackie Speier will be coming on. She'll be coming on and obviously is not a rookie, but the other three are going to be in their first term. So what do you see happening with the Board of Supervisors?
Well, I see it moving to the middle. I mean, it has been in the middle, and I say that without any real hesitation nor a kind of a pointed effort with that. It always, people get along. You don't call other colleagues or colleagues names. You try to function in a way that is collegial and for the benefit of all. And as I witnessed in Sacramento for many years after I got there, is people looked at San Mateo County and realized that it was a county that did get things done, didn't fight, unlike our neighbors to the north and our neighbors to the south, where they're fighting all the time amongst themselves. We never did that. We always got along. We always got to move the ball forward. And I think that's the goal. And I think that's what people in this county have recognized as being the history, the culture, and the backbone of San Mateo County. And they want to go back to that. And I'm not saying that the Board of Supervisors has changed that, but there have been episodes on the board where we've seen a lack of respect, a lack of collegiality, and an upset that has changed that. And in some cases, it is that progressive movement that we've seen.
Jerry, I've heard a little bit of talk out there about you possibly challenging Noelia Corzo in the future. Is there any truth to that? Are you interested in going back onto the board?
Well, I as Mark said, it was the best job, and I'm not the only one that said that. Anna Eshoo said that years ago to me, even. But she was right. You only have to count to 3 on the Board of Supervisors to get anything done, unlike in Sacramento or in Washington. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. Right now, the timing probably would not be right, but next year is a different time for me, and so I'm not going to say no. And let's just see what happens. If we can get a good candidate that can represent, I believe, the interests and the values of the second district in San Mateo County, I'd be more than happy to support that person.
Whether
So I
it's
think
you or someone else, do you-
with me, exactly.
Jerry, whether it's you or someone else, do you think there's no question someone will challenge Supervisor Corzo's reelection?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Jerry Hill, always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us here on election night.
Thanks,
We'll
Mark.
see you
Thanks,
again
Bob.
soon.
Thanks.
I hope so. It's good to
Take
see you.
care.
Take care.
You are watching a live stream of the game. I'm Mark Simon. He's Bob Marks. We are brought to you by the San Mateo Daily Journal, Redwood City Pulse, and the Almanac. And we're here through up until 11 o'clock, and maybe longer, depending on whether or not Bob and I can stay awake. We'll have more guests coming. We'll be scrolling through some results of what we think are the key races. And we're going to take a break right now. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you shortly. Welcome to the second hour of the game's live election night live stream of campaign 2024. I'm Mark Simon.
I'm Bob Marks.
And we're happy to be here with you. We have been scrolling through the results of the latest races. You saw them there yourself. I don't think we need to go through them again, but we are very happy to be joined right now by Julie Lind, who is basically the person in charge of the San Mateo County Central Labor Committee Council. You have the title of executive secretary. I don't know why you guys don't just say you're general manager or executive director, but there you go. It's very plebeian of you. Welcome. Happy to have you here. Anything about this election that jumps out at you right away, Julie?
I'm trying to not pay attention to the national results right now for the purpose of this conversation because it negatively impacts my joy in the local results. So it's exciting. It's an exciting election cycle locally. The way that it's shaping up, the individuals that thus far seem to be rising to the top. I'm excited about the composition that we're going to see in a lot of our elected bodies. Lisa, those results coming out early, that's huge. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. So watching that one, Nicole's results dropping in round one. So a lot of things. And also I'm really excited to see these women, these strong women of color that are stepping up to run, and the electorate is stepping up with them. And it looks like we are going to finally be making more of a shift to have our government truly be representative of our electorate.
Julie, we're beginning to see more and more of the district elections playing out. What's your sense? How is that impacting San Mateo County and changes that may be happening here?
I think we talked a little bit about this in your preview show on Friday. I think district elections are still getting their feet wet, still trying to figure out how that's going to roll out. I think part of that is the collective we that are politically engaged needing to do a better job building the bench. And a lot of us have had this conversation 1,000,002 times over the years. But really, as we have these district elections presenting opportunities to make elected office a little bit more achievable and accessible, then there needs to be more of a recruitment effort and more of really an empowerment effort at the community level to make sure that we are empowering people in all of our different districts to step up to serve and step up to run and to try to mitigate. Like on one hand, you have Andrea Papajohn in Burlingame. Andrea's fantastic, uncontested. And then you have D2 as an open seat with a series of candidates. So it seems to be kind of feast or famine. Either you have none or you got a whole bunch. So trying to figure out how do we get more people engaged in a broader geographic diversity as well as diversity as a whole. So I think it's trying to find its feet. The intent is good. The execution in many ways sucks.
Kamala Harris got 75% of the vote in San Mateo County. Adam Schiff got 75% of the vote. Kevin Mullin and Diane Pappin. Is this a progressive county? Is it more moderate than that? Because in some of the city council races, we've all been following closely. There are some progressives who won 4 years ago who seem to be being seriously challenged, if not outright losing in some of these races. Is San Mateo County in transition? What's going on here?
Why do you get such joy out of asking me this progressive question? It's Mark's thing with me.
Because
so
you have
it's
to weave your way through it. That's why it's fun to watch.
you like to watch me spin. I get that you're a perverse creature, but it's why we get along so well. So it's we have had several friends, call it political group chat, have had this conversation a lot of times. 2020, I think some folks got a little overly excited. So it was a very different time. It was a very different world in 2020. A lot of circumstances and situations were not the same. It was not, I think, the reckoning that some of our progressive colleagues may have felt it was. So I think some of that is coming home to roost this time. It's a more traditional election, a more traditional campaign than it was for some of these folks running now than it was 4 years ago. And when we had the bulk of our folks and the establishment, for lack of a better term, folks were staying home. It was peak COVID. They were not leaving the house. Campaigning was not what it is today because nobody wanted to go out and kill off their neighbor. So the situation is not the same. It was not the reckoning it was painted as. And then, as I said, I think some pieces of that are hitting home.
The state transit agencies, a number of cities in San Mateo County are facing deficits. How does that impact your work in terms of at the bargaining table?
So the transit agencies, I was having a conversation about that to a degree with Gina earlier, Councilwoman Pappen from Millbrae. So with SamTrans and looking at the potential ballot measure relative to transportation funding, trying to figure out what San Mateo County's piece of that is, because with SamTrans not having an operating deficit, but having a lot of capital needs juxtaposed to some of the challenges in our neighboring district and figuring out, okay, everybody wants to come together to find a path, but not if that togetherness means San Mateo County pays the bill for a decade. So really looking at the transportation infrastructure, looking at how this funding breaks down and really what is going to be equitable on all different levels of this funding mechanism equity. But I think there are still a lot of outstanding questions about this transportation fiscal cliff, and given San Mateo County's unique position juxtaposed to the other Bay Area counties, and looking at, is it a 5-county measure, 9-county, a lot of questions to answer, and a lot of things that you can't predict yet relative to that and how it'll impact bargaining.
Labor is one of the more consistently involved entities when it comes to politics, when it comes to involving themselves in campaigns. I know district elections have certainly made more work for you.
Thank you for acknowledging that, sir.
Yeah. How did Labor do? Are you happy with how you guys did in terms of who you endorsed and how they did?
Yes, I'm very happy. As I said, I did not want you to dampen my joy at the local results by referring back to these thus far largely craptastic national ones. No, locally flipping through, I am feeling deep satisfaction and joy and happiness, and also fatigue, and clearly there's something going on.
Well, Julie, thank you for being with us. We know it's a busy night. I know you have many places still to go.
Nothing more important than spending time with you, Mark Simon.
Well, given, I understand that. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Thanks very much.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
We've got a lot of people waiting to come on here. James Coleman and Mark Nagales, both reelected, it appears, to the South San Francisco City Council. Frank, are they ready to come on yet, or do we need to go to someone else?
I'm sorry, who are we bringing on? Mark and?
James and Mark.
There you
Mark.
go.
There's Mark.
And James is here without a photo.
Mark, how are you both doing?
We'll start
Good.
With Mark. Hi, James. Thank you.
Hi, James.
It certainly looks like you're both going to be reelected, barring some sort of weird sudden change in the numbers. What do you think is your sense of why you were reelected and why you were reelected quite so easily? Mark, let's start with you.
Well, I think it's experience matters. I've been on the council for 6 years now, and when I was out and campaigning, I kept talking about my accomplishments. I talked about the free shuttle that came up to Westboro, and for the longest time, that shuttle, which did go around South San Francisco, never went to Westboro, but we were able to secure money through the TA. And childcare was a big issue around families. As the only council member with a young family, I kept hitting that over and over again, that if you're able to get into our program, you're only paying $700 a month compared to $3,000 to $4,000 in outside market. Those are the things that people wanted to hear. They wanted to hear the accomplishments of what I've done to make our district a lot better.
Mark and James, I'm sorry about this. Can we ask you to hang on for a few minutes?
Yeah.
Supervisor Noelia Corzo is available, and we have a small window of time, so we'd like to get her on. Can you guys stand by for a few minutes, and we'll get Supervisor Corzo on? Get a chance to get her take on this election. Hi.
There she is.
Hello.
Joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
First of all, we're not talking much about the national election. There's plenty of people who can talk about that. And some of the people we've had on don't want to talk about it. But what's your feel for how San Mateo County voted today at the local level? We know that they're solidly in the corner of Kamala Harris and most Democrats running statewide. What's your feel for how this vote is unfolded, and what signals can you take from it?
That's a great question. I think, to be quite honest with you, I didn't see the results so far that I would have hoped in terms of the candidates that I personally supported in this election. But I will say that at the end of the day, there are several races where we're lucky in that, we are a progressive stronghold in the nation, and we have overall amazing candidates. And it's not personal. At the end of the day, San Mateo County has prided itself on being collaborative, on being able to solve problems. And I hope that no matter, what the final results are of this election at the local level, that everyone can just, move past any hard feelings they have and work together, because we are all here to serve this community. So,
Supervisor, I know that you had strong feelings about Proposition 36, and I haven't seen the results, but I can guess what's going on with that. Tell us what your problem with that initiative was.
yeah, Prop 36, my main concern is that the financial implications for our county will be overwhelming. We also have, drug treatment programs right now that are struggling just with how they're being funded. We've transitioned now to fee for service, and a lot of nonprofits that provide these services were already struggling even before that happened. And so with the loss of funding that Prop 36 will create, and with the increased demand, I'm really concerned that we're not at a place right now where we can effectively deal with the consequences of Prop 36 passing. But regardless, I'm in conversations with the DA. I'm in conversations with leaders from the nonprofits that run some of these programs, and with our county BHRS department, and we will get prepared, and we will deal with it. But I am concerned, and that's why I didn't support it.
Right. Another issue that comes up with that, Mark will remember that the county for years was under federal sanction in terms of overcrowding in the jails. Had to deal with that over and over again, and ultimately built the new jail that's there. Are you concerned that we may get back into that kind of situation where we have to find a place to put people?
I am concerned, and reality is that we are still understaffed in the sheriff's office, and there are some very difficult challenges happening right now in our sheriff's office, and I am deeply concerned. There have been a lot of things in the media. There will be more to come in the coming weeks, and the county will share the information that we have with the public as they rightly deserve.
You said a few moments ago that this is a progressive county. Do you feel that there appears to have been some people who identified as progressive who are not having a great night? Some of them are losing. You referenced that some of the people you wanted to win aren't doing so well. Do you think there's a backlash going on? Do you think it's part of what happens when you transition to a sort of a new political reality? And, is it possible to make too much out of progressives didn't do so well this time, moderate or establishment candidates did better? Or is that really how this election is unfolding?
I think that with district elections, there is in my race, it was an easier path, but how hard a candidate works, how they use the resources they have, what resources they have access to, all of that matters. And so, at the end of the day, do I think it's a backlash? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that when there are elections and there are competitive races, the entire community benefits benefits from that in terms of, the conversations that happen, the dialogue that happens in the community, the issues that are debated in public, the stances people have to take, and how they ultimately do or don't meet the promises they made during the campaign. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's backlash. I think this is what strong democracy looks like, and our community benefits from that.
It's an unfolding story.
Yeah.
Continues to
The Board of Supervisors is going to have a major change in 2025. Two longtime members, Dave Pine and Warren Slocum, are leaving. Tell us kind of your take on what's going to happen in 2025, and how do you view the new board?
I'm excited. I'm excited for a new board. I think that change is always opportunity. I'm deeply sad about, not having my colleagues that have served for over a decade on the board anymore. But I do think that, when change comes, it's an opportunity for improvement. It's an opportunity for reflection. It's an opportunity for things to shift. And my intention is always for things to shift in a positive direction, more transparency, more community engagement, more participatory politics, more participatory budgets, etc. I'm excited that, while we don't know the final results of D4, former Congresswoman Jackie Speier has a wealth of experience. I think that's a benefit to the new board. I also think that, as someone who has been in the role now for almost 2 years, I hope that former Congresswoman Speier and I can learn from each other, and I hope to mentor whoever the D4 supervisor is. And I will take everything that I learned and all of the, structures and systems that we created in our office, and I will happily share that information. And, I want us to be a united team looking to solve problems, looking to do better for this community. And that's the intention that I have. And I know that the two incoming supervisors, they're running to solve problems. And I'm really excited about that. And hey, majority woman board, who cannot be happy about that?
Supervisor Noelia Corzo, thank you so much for being with us. We know you're going to start gearing up for your own re-election, so we'll see you around the county. But we know you're busy tonight, so thanks for finding time with us to join us on the game. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks. Good to see you.
Let's go back to James Coleman and Mark Nagales. I apologize for bumping you guys like that, but so it goes. I'm sure. I hope you understand and can forgive us.
No worries. I've been updating my own whiteboard and doing my election results.
That's what we need, Mark.
That was the old Tim Russert whiteboard. There you go.
Exactly.
James, can you hear us? Because we don't have. James, you need to turn on your microphone, I think, and we also don't have video of you. Let's talk a little bit while we're waiting for James to come on. I know his time is limited. We've got. I think we've overbooked our show. We've got people backed up here.
So Mark, James had to jump. He had another call he had to be on at 9:20. So
we can catch up with him later. You were one of two candidates that was targeted by sort of the quintessential establishment. Oops.
Did I
lose? We have Mark, but only on audio. Well, hopefully we'll come back to him, but we have other people waiting for us. Let's start with Tom McCune from Belmont. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Good evening.
It looks as though you're winning that seat that had quite a number of candidates, including a colleague of yours, Davina Hurt. But it looks like you're going to win. And it looks like, well, I guess the question is, I know the independent expenditure was not anything you had anything to do with. It wasn't your plan. My guess is if they had asked you, you would have said thank you, but no. But in any event, how much do you think that played a role? We mentioned this earlier in the show that some of the oil companies made a substantial expenditure in support of you, and then it wasn't attacking Davina so much as just extolling your virtues. which I'm sure you had no trouble agreeing with, but it wasn't something you chose to have happen. How much do you think it played a role in your winning this race?
Mark, I don't know. I wish I knew. Basically, what they did is they took information from my website, turned it into a mailer, and sent it out in the mail. So I can't complain about the content. And they didn't really add anything to my messaging. They just increased the number of mailings, basically. So, I mean, I did 3 mailers of my own. I ran a really old-fashioned type of campaign. I mean, I got out there early. I had yard signs out a month before anybody else did. I set myself a goal of walking every street in the district and walking on and knocking on every door I could get to, and I managed to do that. So it was kind of an old-fashioned personal type of campaign. And I think people responded to that. I mean, if somebody wanted to, talk for 30 seconds and move on down the road, I would. If they said, come on in, sit down, have coffee, and spend an hour, I'd spend an hour or two with them. So I hope that it was that kind of campaigning that made the difference. I think, maybe those additional mailers that just kind of duplicated my message may have added a few votes, but I don't think they would have made the difference based on the numbers that I see right now.
Tom, a lot of cities in the county are facing deficits. Belmont is not one of them. In fact, you have a surplus. Why is that the case? And what have you done in Belmont that puts you kind of in a unique position?
Well, so I was on the old city finance commission 10 years ago. And at the time, our financial reserves were like $4 million a year. And that met the legal requirement, but I was really uneasy about that. For a city, I thought if there's any kind of an emergency, that's not enough. So we haven't done any one big dramatic thing, but it's just been basic financial management of every line item. And we've kind of gotten it to the point where our reserves are now like 25 million. It, goes up and down somewhat, but it's, many times what it was before. And it's not one big dramatic thing. It's a bunch of little things. The one thing we've done is Measure I, which is a sales tax tweak that's netting. It's yielding about $3 million a year that's going into street repairs. That was the number one thing where we were not doing a good job. Belmont just ignored the streets for about 30 years. They got worse and worse and worse. That's the number one complaint I got from people knocking on doors. And we've made a lot of progress on it. In 4 years, we've made a lot of progress on streets, but we've still got 5 or 6 years of playing catch up on 30 years of deferred maintenance. But in terms of dollars and cents, that's the one thing that's bringing in an identifiable chunk of $3 million a year.
One of the most astonishing pieces of data I saw during the campaign in a poll that showed, there's a classic question they've been asking in polls since the 1930s, is the country on the right track or the wrong track? And 74% said it's on the wrong track. What are you hearing in Belmont? Are people generally happy with the way the city is going? And what kind of concerns have you been hearing about in your door-to-door ventures?
Yeah, I mean, I generally got pretty positive feedback. I mean, you can't make all the people happy all of the time. The two things I heard over and over again, like 10 to 1, fix the streets and do something about traffic on Ralston. Everything else paled in comparison to those two issues.
Yeah.
And we've made a lot of progress on the streets, and we're continuing to do that. And we've actually, there's no way to widen Ralston. There's no way to add more lanes. That's impossible. But we've put in a new system that does a better job of controlling the stoplights, a signalization system, so that traffic ought to be able to flow through better, and you should have to wait less to make turns at stoplights and stuff. So, I think, like I said, 10 to 1. If I promised people we were going to continue making progress on those two issues, they were pretty happy. And, the other thing, every city, homeowners complain about basically permitting and inspections. If they want to add on to their house or renovate their house, everybody feels like they kind of get the runaround. And I'm an architect in my day job. I've dealt with permits forever. And we have actually expedited that process over the last 10 years. Belmont used to be a terrible city for permits and inspections. We're pretty good now. And sometimes people don't realize that, but it's much easier to do renovation work and all of those kind of things in Belmont now. So I think the message is getting out there, and nobody's perfectly happy, but I think they're a lot happier than they were 10 years ago.
Belmont has entered into a partnership, a plan at Notre Dame de Namur with Stanford University. How's that going to benefit the city of Belmont?
Well, I in a lot of ways. Notre Dame de Namur was going bankrupt, quite frankly. They were teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. If they had gone under, that 47-acre site would almost certainly have been auctioned off to a housing developer.
Right.
And as much as I support affordable housing, if a developer exploited the right state laws, they could have put 4,000 housing units on that site and done nothing for traffic mitigation, nothing for community benefits. Stanford, and the deal's only 99% complete. It isn't, they haven't signed on the dotted line yet. So, but I think the odds are 99% is going to go through. They've committed to do quite a bit for traffic mitigation. They've committed millions of dollars toward community benefits, one of which would go toward the community recreation center that we've been trying to develop. There will be some housing there, but it's not like 4,000 units with no traffic mitigation. So it's going to create jobs. It's going to maintain the use of that site as an educational facility. And every time we've met with Stanford, they seem like they're going to be a great community partner in multiple ways.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, for being with us. Congratulations on your reelection, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to shift now to a couple of people in Redwood City where there are two races that right now are too close to call. Diana Reddy is running for, as we described earlier, running for a seat she held at one time and now has is running for re-election to it, if you want to call it that. The seat was essentially vacant for 2 years. And then we also have Bella Eshoo, who is running against incumbent Lisette Espinoza-Garnica. So we're looking forward to having Diana and Bella. There's Bella. Looks like your race is too close to call right now, Bella. Oh, your microphone.
Yeah, no, it's still very early. I think last time about 2,800 or so people, no, more than that, voted. Anyway, it's still very early. And you know, the pattern last time was that the incumbent Janet Morgans and Lisette.
Here I asked.
And they had fairly behind, and Lisette.
This is a double hitter here.
Throughout the next several days. So I'm expecting the same pattern again. I'm expecting that gap closed, but I am optimistic. I do think I have a real chance of winning. I'm not out for sure. So I'm, you're right. It's too close to call.
That could still happen. Same with you, Diana. It looks like your race is, to use the line that they're using constantly on the networks tonight, it looks like your race is too close to call.
It is definitely too close to call. Yes. And I'm cautiously optimistic, but we'll see what happens in the next few days. This you may recall, this is what happened in 2018, that I had the lead on election night, and then Rick Hunter and I went back and forth for several days and weeks, and so I was ahead, he was ahead, I was ahead again. So yeah, it can happen that way in our city races. And we're at the San Mateo County watch party at the Dominique Hoskins Black History Museum, and Lisa is here with me.
Yes, we see Lisa.
Yes.
And there's a race that isn't close.
Yeah.
Lisa, I think we can safely congratulate you on being our newest San Mateo County Supervisor.
Thank you so much. I think I keep saying, is it too early? I mean, there's still votes out there to be counted.
Yeah, but the way the math works, in order for Antonio to catch you, he almost has to flip the numbers the way they are. And I can't imagine there are that many votes still out there that are waiting to be counted that would have suddenly switch, completely reverse the way things have been going. Tell us a little bit about why you think you've managed to win this race.
You know, it was about knocking on doors and really being in community and having not just a strong ground game and good help consultants and volunteers. And then it's 12 years of being, almost 12 years of being an elected official in San Mateo County, and those relationships, I think, have really made a difference as well.
You know, East Palo Alto has always sort of been, and you're on the council there, been an entity unto itself. In many ways, it seems like it's not fully involved in the rest of the county. Is that fair? And how do you think your election might change that?
You know what? When I became an elected official, it was important to really engage in the county. There was one of the former council members that made sure that I was engaged in the regional boards as well. So I think that's what is so important. And I would tell anyone else that's on the council to really engage, not just sit on that board, but be really engaged in regional boards as well.
You know, you're coming on. You'll be a brand new board member. So will Jackie Speier, although obviously not to the same degree. But you've got two other board members who are in their first term. Is that a challenge or an opportunity, or maybe a little of both?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, but we're all going to, you know, it's important to work together. You know, to be a new board member, it is important to come together and work together, and we'll definitely be looking forward to that.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, Bella and Diana, if you are successful, what are your priorities as you go into 2025?
My priorities are always just to be of service to my community, and so I look to see where the needs are greatest, and I put my energy into those needs. And knocking on doors, I was telling people tonight I've been practically kidnapped because people were so excited to see me when I got to the door, and it was hard for me to move on to the next door. But people have real anxieties about things, and so I make copious notes that I'm sharing with the city, and that's the way I do business. I just make sure that I'm listening to my residents and making sure that they feel that they have been heard, that their voices have been heard.
Well, Bella and Anna, thank you for being with us. We hope that your evening isn't too filled with suspense. Lisa, I appreciate your being here.
Thank
I know
you.
Bob does too. And good luck to you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to be joined now by former Congresswoman and Supervisor-elect Jackie Speier. We're happy to have her joining us, I believe. Or maybe not. You know,
Sorry, too many buttons. Give me just a second.
we're juggling a lot.
There we are.
There we go.
Hello, Supervisor. How does it feel to be a supervisor again?
How does it feel?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I've started meeting with each of the department heads over the last week, and I'm getting into the granular work that needs to be done to make sure that the county continues to function well. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting to have Lisa on the team, and I look forward to working with her. I supported her, and we'll move forward. I'm heartbroken about what's going on everywhere else in the country, but we're going to do some good things for San Mateo County.
Jerry Hill was on earlier, and he said the best job he's ever had was being on the Board of Supervisors. How do you feel about that?
Well, Bob, I have to agree with him, because it took me only 44 years to realize that the best job I ever had was the one I had 44 years ago, because you actually can get things done. Yeah. You know, Congress is set up now to just maintain the status quo, and no matter how cooperative you can be with your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, you can get bills passed off the House floor. They just can sit in the Senate because they just don't want to take them up. So if you really want to help people, you can do it most effectively on the local level. And San Mateo County has been an excellent run county for a long, long time. and we've got resources that we need to make sure we're using appropriately. And I'm looking forward to working on all of these local issues. One of which is the baby bonus that will kick off in January, which is what got me interested in coming back to the board. And we're going to be giving Medicaid eligible infants randomly who are born in San Mateo County $300 a month for the first 3 years of life. And that's important because that's when all the brain development happens. So in terms of, being able to show that, and then maybe go back to Congress and say, at the very least, at least restore the child tax credit for 0 to 3, because then you have less costs associated with special ed and the criminal justice system. And these kids have a shot at really making it.
The board is going to have 4 members, counting you, who are in their first term. Obviously, this isn't your first time on the merry-go-round, but what do you think it means about where the board's going to go and what it's going to do, that you've got people who are still in many ways figuring the job out?
Well, I think that we're going to work well together. I mean, we've got a great county manager, and we've got some really talented department heads, as I'm finding out with my individual meetings with them. So I think what's going to be most important is that we find common ground and then we work well together. And so I will attempt to be the mother hen that keeps us all together and working well together.
For a long time, you've been the most popular elected official in San Mateo County. You certainly have had your share of tragedy and drama in your life, but it seems every time you get knocked down, you come back stronger with more energy. Where does that strength come from?
I'm just lucky to be alive. So I think it comes from the fact that, when I just got, knocked down a little bit with the breast cancer, I just reminded myself that I've had 46 extra years of life that weren't supposed to happen. So I think that every day is a challenge for everybody. And, some of their experiences that are troublesome aren't as public or as well known, but I think the one gene I have is one that can understand the pain that people go through and attempt to fix it.
So we have been discussing throughout the evening whether San Mateo County is a progressive county or more of an establishment moderate county. What's your take on that?
I think we're both. One of the things that really made me want to think about coming back to the board is because I thought it was swinging too far to the left, frankly, and that it was losing its decorum. So, for instance, Ray Mueller had an amendment to a sanctuary county ordinance in which he wanted to allow the county to continue to cooperate with ICE in cases where there was murder, rape, or sexual abuse of a child, all of which are appropriate. And it went down 4-1. San Francisco County has a sanctuary county, but has 36 exemptions to not cooperate, to 36 exemptions where they do cooperate with ICE. So I thought we were just off to the wrong side on a number of issues. So I hope that Ray will bring that amendment back, because I think we need to take it up and I think we need to pass it. In fact, I think it should be even bigger than it was.
That debate also included some fairly harsh language, some fairly harsh personal criticisms. And I think a lot of people were surprised that none of the board members reacted to that and said something like, "We don't do that here." I think people are kind of expecting you to do that. How do you feel?
I actually think we need to have a code of conduct. In Congress, when someone speaks out of turn, you take their words down. You make a motion to take their words down, and not that we should necessarily have to do that, but we should have a code of conduct that respects each other's ability to articulate their positions, to not get personal in terms of any of their commentary. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to do that.
Just back for a moment to your previous job. If, as it looks, the former president is elected tonight, how should Congress deal with him this time around?
Well, I don't think you're going to be able to deal with him, frankly. I'm deeply concerned about what this means for our country and, frankly, for the world. Ukraine is on the chopping block right now. I think if you look at cryptocurrency, it's going to be any restrictions on it are going to be reduced significantly. I think that it's going to be a vengeful administration. I think that's just, believe him when he says the things he said. Donald Trump has been very clear about what he wants to do. He's going to be a dictator for day one. Well, on day one, he can create martial law, and you won't have to be a dictator anymore because you will have done it by martial law. I mean, not that that's necessarily going to happen, but I do think we're in for a very dark period. I hope and I believe the House is a shot at flipping to Democratic, but the Senate has, clearly gone. I mean, people like Sherrod Brown and Bob Casey now are, and we already know that John Tester has lost his seat. So it's going to be a very tough 4 years.
Jackie Speier, thank you for being with us. Welcome back to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you.
We'll see more of you as time goes on. And we also extend our good wishes for your full recovery from your breast cancer.
Thank
challenge.
you.
I'm sorry that happened to you, but it's always something, isn't it?
Yeah. There's also 300,000 cases a year now in the United States, up from about 150,000 20 years ago. So we need to do more research on that as well.
Yeah.
But thank you. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
We're going to try and get Mark Nagales back on one more time here. And if it's all right, we're going to have him be joined
There
by
he is.
Jeff G. from the Redwood City Council. Jeff was, in an upset, was reelected without any option.
Close for Jeff.
There has long been talk in this county, and not just this county, statewide, about the eventual emergence of certain key ethnic communities as influential in the county. And it seems to me, and the reason I'm asking is because maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me the Asian community has really begun to assert itself, perhaps more than people may have expected. You see more Asians getting elected if you count people from the subcontinent as well. And it seems to me it's an emerging power in the county. Jeff, let's start with you because I know you're very active in the San Mateo County Asian Pacific Islander organization. Is that, you think that it's an emerging influence?
Mark and Bob, good to see you. Mark, good to see you. I think it is emerging. I mean, the API community in San Mateo County is the largest cultural demographic. But yet, when you look across the spectrum of who's elected, we have a long ways to go. And so being able to speak up, show up, and take on leadership roles is something new. And I think it is an emerging demographic that is beginning to show its place and beginning to take its place. And there's still a long ways to go, but we're just beginning.
Mark, is it fair to say that there's also a sort of a cultural reluctance to get too far, too high a profile? I remember Norm Mineta used to say that every time he took a step in his political career, his father would say to him, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. Now, of course, they were the subject of the internment during World War II, so they may have had a little more sensitivity to that. But is there a need to convince people it's okay to do this? It's not dangerous. It's not, it's important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hardest thing to do is to actually run, right? Because you're putting yourself out there, and especially in South San Francisco, we have a large Filipino community, but we didn't have a Filipino until myself and Flor Nicholas were elected in 2018. I represent, when we went to district elections, the largest Filipino contingency in South San Francisco. But it took so long for someone like me to run, to actually win. And so you have to encourage people that look like me and Jeff, and really like get the next generation to say, hey, your time is coming up, and your time might be now.
Really, for both of you, question, do you feel any obligation or need to try to recruit more Asian Americans to run for office?
I'll let the chair.
Bob, absolutely. I mean, as Councilmember Nagales said, it is something. Number one, there's a cultural barrier. I mean, for our elders, the first question is, why do you want to do this? You're supposed to be at home raising the kids, taking care of the family. And I've always argued that we just need to redefine family to our community, to our district, to our city. But more importantly, by being in the elected roles that we are in, it's pretty amazing to be able to show our young people, oh my gosh, there's somebody that looks like me, that we can do that. And so building that pipeline is really critical. And as part of the API caucus in San Mateo County, we are absolutely focused on interns and leadership development for our young people, because they are the future. And so it's really, really important that we build that pipeline.
Jeff, let me ask you about the other races in Redwood City. Are you surprised how close they are? Or did you kind of expect that?
I'm not surprised at how close they are. I mean, when Redwood City and many other cities transitioned to district elections, it was kind of a sudden new thing. And there was, as we just talked about, there really wasn't a pipeline of candidates per district. And so when it happened in 2020, which was Redwood City's first district election, there were a lot of unknown people, that wanted to show up. As we've talked, Mark, Simon, you and I have talked about, it's one thing to run as a new candidate. It's a whole nother thing to run as an incumbent, because now you have 4 years of record that people can look at, how you voted, how you've made decisions, how you've represented the community. So it goes both ways. Being new, it can be refreshing, but running as an incumbent, now you have a record that people can look at and point to.
Do you think that the district elections have lessened the impact of incumbency? Because somebody who's challenging an incumbent can knock on every door in the district, that makes it a little tougher. The incumbency doesn't carry quite the weight that it used to.
It is different. There's no question about it. I think as we get used to district elections, and South San Francisco is very similar, that as we begin to make it normal, there's 4. I mean, in Redwood City, this is only a third election where there's district elections. As that becomes more normal, I think it will even itself out between incumbency and new candidates. It's still relatively new. There are still people saying, how come I don't get to vote for a council member in my district this year? And so we're still working through that new transition. But I think by the time we get to the end of this decade, everyone will be used to it, and it'll even itself out. I don't know if Mark Nagales has any comments that he'd like to share about it, because South San Francisco is going through the same thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, in South City, we the two incumbents looks like we're both going to win, myself and Mayor Coleman. But we still had challengers who were trying to make differences, like he's saying. They're doing, they're trying to say, well, we want to look at a different perspective. In my race, I talked about like the things I accomplished. And that was really what people wanted to hear. They wanted to hear what you've done for the last, in my case, 6 years. Why should we reelect you in those last 6 years? Tell us what you've done. And that really made, I think, a big difference in terms of my race, because I was running against another Filipino. So we had 2 Filipinos running in a constituency that represented the largest Filipino district in South San Francisco. So we had to make us stand out a little differently from each other. For me, it was about my experience and what I've done in terms of my accomplishments. So I think for me right now, being an incumbent did help, because people did know who I am. But as years come along and people are getting more used to district elections, maybe that won't be the case.
In both of yours, go ahead, Mark.
One of the person who recruited your opponent is Carol Matsumoto. a formidable figure in South San Francisco for decades. And it looks like in both cases, you and James Coleman are going to win re-election fairly easily. Is that signal the end of an era in South San Francisco, that this is a city that's moving into a new generation, sort of a new politics?
Well, I'll say that when I was talking to voters, I'll speak for myself, they were focused on the future and what South City is going to look like. And they wanted to see progress. And I think in a lot of ways, James and I represented that progress in terms of what we've done, in terms of childcare, in terms of affordable housing. They wanted to see that. Now, there's still a good group of individuals who want to see the city kind of the way it was maybe a few years ago. But that's not the case, because as we progress, and especially when the state's telling us we have to build more housing, we have to pivot. And that means progress. And for a lot of people, sometimes that's a little hard. And so, I think James and I and some other members of the council, we are looking forward in terms of South City is doing things the right way. And we have to continue to grow, and we have to continue to progress.
Both of you are dealing with cities with a budget deficit. Start with you, Jeff. How do you see Redwood City dealing with that issue in 2025?
2025. Wow. Well, one of the good things is our business license tax measure, Measure BB, looks like it's going to win pretty significantly, which will help. But it's still not going to fill the structural gap. And so I've said it from the very beginning that a couple different things. We need to look for new revenue, which is the business license tax. We need to tighten our belts a little bit, just like everybody when there's a shortfall, as well as we need to amplify economic development. Jobs, new businesses, they all contribute to the formula of making sure that we're financially sustainable. And we're going to have to do all three in 2025, 26, 27, and even 28, because cities kind of move slow, just like government. It just doesn't change overnight. And so we will have to work on all three efforts to make sure we're financially sustainable.
Mark?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, looks like our business license tax is going to pass, which is fantastic, but it's not going to fill a financial gap that we have. It's the maximum potentially we could raise about $2.6 million to $3 million. That's still not enough, and so we have to continue generating more revenue. And we're going to have to think of other ways to do this, because that's not enough in terms of filling the gap. And so that means potentially bringing more sales tax. Development really has slowed down in South San Francisco, and that's been a big revenue generator for us, and really for a lot of cities. And so how do we get that pipeline of development back into South San Francisco and really San Mateo County?
Jeff G., Mark Nagales, thank you so much for being with us on our live stream election show. We'll see you around.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Our next guest is Supervisor Ray Mueller, who's been waiting very patiently, and we really appreciate it. Is that the San Mateo County coast side in the background there, Ray?
It is, yes.
It looks like Pedro Point, actually, is what it looks like. I'm not sure.
You're correct.
That's where I learned to surf.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let's just talk generally first about what's going on in the county and some of the election results. I know you follow them closely. And what are your first impressions of how things have been going with the election?
Yeah, it was a spirited election season, and I think there have been some things that surprised people with some of these results. But with the move to district elections, these are really very hyper-local, neighborhood-centric races. The propositions, frankly, have gone the way that I expected them to. As well, and I have to say the race for Congress also went the way I expected it to. So, but there were definitely surprises taking place at the local council level.
Prop 36. I know the board wrangled with whether or not to take a position on it. As I recall correctly, that was an initiative you were trying to see if the board could take a position on. Were you disappointed that the board didn't, because it's passing right now fairly easily? Well, 36 being the one that would toughen the penalties for people who commit essentially petty theft crimes and some minor drug-related crimes.
So I wanted the board to endorse that. That was something that I had endorsed personally. My colleagues weren't interested in taking that up. It was brought, I asked them twice on two separate occasions, and because there wasn't support, we didn't end up voting on it. But, I understand that that's something that as a board, you need to respect where your colleagues are on something. I felt pretty strongly about that issue, and it looks like the voters did too.
Ray, there's a pretty big increase in crime in San Mateo County. Violent crime is up. Certainly retail theft, getting back to Prop 36. How can, I know the board only deals with the unincorporated area, but what can be done to try to curb some of this?
Well, earlier this year, I actually did bring an item before the board for my district that was a burglary reward program that would go ahead and incentivize people to come forward with information. The way that we set policy, interacting with the sheriff's office, obviously trying to work with the office to increase the number of sheriff's deputies that there are so that we have proper enforcement taking place in the field. And then really just trying to create programs and support. Prop 36 is a great example, support programs that we think are going to make a difference. That was one of the reasons why I came out to that. If you look at where our drug courts were before and after Prop 47, we went from having hundreds of people in drug court a month to a total of 6. And that really, over time, has a cumulative effect that we see taking place both in our county and in others. And so it really is about, and I think Congresswoman Speier, when she was on earlier, she talked about the position that I tried to take with the board with respect to cooperating with ICE for the most heinous types of felonies. These types of policy decisions make an impact at the local level, and they translate long-term cumulatively to the public health and safety of the county.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Half Moon Bay. Were you surprised that the two incumbents? I mean, it's pretty clear that Joaquin Jimenez is going to be ousted. It may be a bit closer for Harvey Rarbach, but he's almost 10 points behind, and the numbers would have to change dramatically for that to be reversed. Are you surprised by that? What do you think is at the heart of this kind of turnover among incumbents in Half Moon Bay?
Well, Harvey's been on the council for a while, and so I know it was going to be difficult for him to go ahead and get out there and campaign. Great public servant, and it swings. And one of the things that people need to understand in local politics is there is a pendulum. It swings back and forth, and it just came for Harvey's time. That it looks like the public was ready to go ahead and have Patrick come in. Pat is a dedicated resident. I'm looking forward to working with him on the council. And with respect to Mayor Jimenez's case, again, Mayor Jimenez has been a tremendous advocate in the community. But in this circumstance, I think specifically facing some of the issues that Half Moon Bay is facing financially, Paul comes to the council having been a professional administrator, and specifically having been a professional administrator in the city of Half Moon Bay. And I think those things probably weighed on voters' minds.
You did drop your endorsement of Councilmember Jimenez fairly late in the campaign, and you said, are you in any better position to explain that in any detail now? You declined to do so, citing the privacy of other people involved in some controversy, some unspecified controversy. Are you in any better position to explain why you changed your endorsement on him?
Unfortunately, no, I can't. I need to respect the privacy of the individuals involved.
Okay.
You and Supervisor Corzo are on the subcommittee that is looking into the situation with the sheriff's chief of staff. Judge Cordell has been working on an investigation, a report. When do you expect to see that report come out?
Soon, very soon, within the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
The question I've been posing to people, both I posed it in my column, I guess, and to people behind the scenes is, how much are you limited by what the board can do if they find something they don't like about the way the sheriff's office is being managed?
Well, certainly there are limits on what you can do with respect to an elected official, but the law also provides us avenues to take in the same token when there is an elected official. And so I think you'd look at all of those. And then just based on what is found in that investigative report, certainly you can point to what other jurisdictions have done when they faced a tough circumstance where they believed an elected official who was constitutionally protected was not behaving properly. That was something that happened recently, as 2 years ago in Los Angeles County. And what happened in that case was the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors actually brought a charter amendment before voters in that county so that they could go ahead and take action. I don't know if that's something that would happen here or not. Certainly that we need to go ahead and look through that report and see what it's contained and make sure it's fully vetted. But there are a number of avenues we can take if we need to take them.
Los Angeles County has a measure on the ballot, Measure G, that would increase the size of the Board of Supervisors from 5 to 9, but it would also create a county executive that would be an elected position. What's your thought about that?
We sure have a great county executive. Yeah. You know, I don't see the need for that right now. Candidly, one of the things that's interesting in San Mateo County that gets kicked around from charter amendment to charter amendment is whether we should actually reduce the number of elected officials that we have. Mm-hmm. I don't foresee, but I'm only one member of that board, but I don't foresee us making the county executive an elected position. And frankly, I like the fact that the Board of Supervisors has oversight over the county executive. Mm-hmm. There's a tremendous amount of power there within the county executive. There's a tremendous trust relationship between residents and that county executive. And it's great that the board has the ability to hire and fire that county executive.
Well, the political argument would be that when it's time to throw our weight around in the region, San Francisco has a mayor, San Jose has a mayor, Oakland has a mayor, I guess you could say, of sorts. But there's no clearly identifiable leader in San Mateo County who can assert the county's interests. And as people say, it's one of the reasons why the county is considered as sort of a flyover county, that its interests don't get asserted at the regional level the way it should be. What is
I think that actually has to do with more of a protocol issue than anything. So we do have a president of the Board of Supervisors, but what we haven't done is set protocol amongst all the cities that person would be recognized in such a fashion, and nor with our neighboring cities. And that's something that I've started to have conversations with the folks from our different cities about, is setting forth that protocol and then sharing it regionally about how the president of the Board of Supervisors should be treated regionally.
We had Jackie Speier on just before you came on. I think you were able to hear what she had to say. She talked specifically about your proposal to expand the level at which the county cooperates with ICE in certain really serious felony cases. But also she talked about decorum, and clearly one of the notable elements of that whole debate was some of the personal attacks on you. Are you looking forward to having Jackie Speier on the board?
How lucky am I? Are you kidding me? How lucky am I? I have the most beautiful district in the state of California with the San Mateo County coast and the mountain region. And then on top of it, I get to work with Jackie Speier. Are you kidding me? Like I can't wait to work with her. I can't wait to learn from her and to collaborate with her. And I think she will. I think that if the circumstance were unfortunately to ever occur again, I think Jackie might have something to say about it. So, but no, I'm really looking forward. I'm looking forward to working with Lisa too. I've known her for 12 years. We both were elected about the same time to our city council roles. A fabulous council member in East Palo Alto, and going to be a great supervisor.
Do you see a shift away from, there were a number of progressives elected 2 years ago, 4 years ago. You see on the Half Moon Bay race, Harvey Rarbach was clearly a progressive. He's apparently going to lose. Do you see a shift occurring sort of back into the more traditional way that San Mateo County conducts its politics?
Everywhere else in the country, San Mateo County, even our moderates would be considered to be incredibly progressive. Yeah. So, there's a swing that goes back and forth. The pendulum goes back and forth in San Mateo County. Certainly tonight, if you were to look at the way that it's swinging, you could say that the county is becoming more moderate, but it goes back and forth, and that's something that we expect.
Ray Mueller, thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for your patience waiting for us, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for covering. Appreciate it.
We're now happy to be joined by Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, an old friend of well, just about everybody in the county. She's on the phone. It's been one of the reasons.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Anna.
Hi. Good to be with you.
One of the reasons we wanted to have you on was to talk about the national outcome. And it looks like it's going to be a hard night for the Democrats.
It is. It is. So far, I'm just, I'm in the car leaving a gathering in Los Altos where several of the candidates were, and it was a wonderful party. You know, all the local government people and someone that is really like a daughter to me, Margaret Abe-Koga. It looks like she has secured a seat on the Santa Clara Board of Supervisors. So I'm thrilled for her and the others. There are many, many friends in the room. So, but it's good to be with you. The news that that I absorbed before I left the house and since is not to my liking. Let's put it that way. Both in terms of you know, those that ran for the Senate, Colin Allred in Texas. He's a real star in the House, a marvelous, marvelous member. And I thought if anyone could take out Ted Cruz, he could. But he evidently didn't. So I'm deeply disappointed there because he would have enhanced the Senate. The House races, there's so many of them that have not reported yet, Mark, and you may be ahead of me. The last notice I saw was the next update from the DCCC will be tomorrow. So there's not too much that I know there.
Anna, this Bob Marks.
Hi, Bob. How
Hi,
nice
how
to
are
hear
you?
your voice.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in ages.
It has been a long time.
Yeah.
How should the Democrats, I know you're retiring, but how should the Democrats deal with President Trump? Certainly him having the Senate. One thing worse than Trump being president is if he were to have both houses. But how should the Democrats deal with him?
Well, I think it's not so much how to deal with them as to the choices they make about how they conduct themselves. When Hakeem Jeffries joined the Congress, I watched him very carefully from a distance and had chats with him. But I thought, this one is a star. This one is a star. And he is. I think that the leadership of the Democrats is so important because it's that person that has the ability, and he does have the ability, and he has demonstrated it, to keep the caucus together. To keep the caucus together. I mean, if the coach of the 49ers can't get the team to play as a team, they're never going to win anything. They're not going to be able to operate on the field. So that may be a little bit of an analogy, but I think it still underscores how important it is to have a leader that both inspires, but also has the right, knows how to use the discipline that is needed. And I think that it's absolutely essential for the Democrats to gain the House because the new members will be, so the new Congress will be sworn in on the 3rd, and the 6th is the day that the electoral ballots are counted. So our country was blessed to have Speaker Pelosi. And it was Nancy that said at the early evening of that horrible, horrible day, We are going back into session so that the American people know that our democracy is intact, and the people of the world will know that the government of the United States of America is intact. So it really matters who is in the speaker's chair. And I mean, there are always battles in the House. It's the House of the people. It's a rough and tumble place. It's not anything like the Senate. And so, the great debates will ensue there, but to have the right leadership in the House, and I keep saying the right leadership and how they conduct themselves. I think there are very few people in the United States tonight that even know that this took place. It was the Democrats that saved Speaker Johnson. And so many constituents asked me, why would the Democrats do that? You don't agree with Johnson. He did this and that, and on and on. Because we didn't want the American people to be subjected to more chaos. So that's understanding how to govern. The Republicans have had a civil war going on for the entirety of the Congress that's going to conclude at the end of this year. Some of them have absolutely no interest in governing, and the rest of them don't know how. And, they've battled over who's going to be their speaker. They're battling that out right now as we speak. So, the question you asked, Bob, is a very good one, how to handle them. You have to have the Democratic caucus totally in order with a speaker, with a leader, excuse me, a speaker that will lead with integrity for all the reasons that are necessary for our country, for our democracy.
Have you been able to pay any attention to some of the local races that have been going on? It looks like, for lack of a
Well,
better,
it looks like that Lisa from East Palo Alto, and I was proud to support her, will be a new member of the board, and I'm pleased about that. I know that my pal Kevin Mullin is, people are returning him to Congress. Of course, Jackie won in the primary, so I look forward to her being sworn in, and so that's the board. I think the legislative races, there really were not real challenges to the incumbents, so their reelection is ensured, and it looks like the person that will represent the most distinguished congressional district in the country will be Sam Liccardo.
well, we'll see how that plays out, huh?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw earlier numbers, and that's what it looked like. But you have to wait until these things are called. That was when I think it was just the first round that was reported, the first reporting, I should say. Yeah.
Well, I knew you were unhappy with the whole tone of that campaign.
Well, I think that, Mark, there are very few Americans that have been chosen to serve in the Congress. And it is such a high privilege. Every time I have walked out on the floor, there are just a couple of steps you take to get onto the floor. And every time, and it's probably been thousands of times that I've done that, I look at that chamber and I think, isn't it something that people have placed their trust in me to be here to represent them? And it seemed to me, maybe from somewhat of a distance, that what is your vision for our country, your overarching vision, and then your values that take you to what your positions are on various issues. And I, I was disappointed that I never heard that. Now, maybe that those aspirations were spoken to in forums that I wasn't able to attend because I'm not here during the week. I'm here at home on the weekend when Congress is not in session. So it is, I mean, it's a tough job. It's a very, very, very demanding job, and you do the legislation at the other end of the country. So it requires you to move around a lot. I've commuted across the country every week for 32 years. So I won't miss that. But I'll miss the work because the work has deep meaning to me and I love the challenge. Uh, I've always thought whatever our challenges are, that they represent opportunities, you know. So whomever succeeds me, I'll do everything I can to make it a very smooth transition because that's important to do on behalf of my constituents.
Anna, 32 years in Congress is quite a remarkable run. As you look back over the time, what are you most proud of?
Oh, there are several things. There are many things. I think that domestically, that we were able to make the dream of former presidents. There were so many individuals that ran for president that wanted to. They aspired to create a health plan for the American people. And the Affordable Care Act today is enjoyed by 45 million Americans. 45 million Americans. And these are not junk insurance plans. So it's been transformational for people in their day-to-day lives. When you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And then the majority of bankruptcies in our country were as a result of the bills that are created when people become ill and very ill. It costs a lot. So that's deeply gratifying to me. I think that some of the places that I've been and what I've experienced abroad, to have traveled to Afghanistan several times to be with our troops there. And more than once on Mother's Day, because there are so many women that are serving in our armed forces and in Iraq as well. So it's a beautiful tapestry, Bob, of not only experiences, but I'm so proud of the things that I've been able to get done, not only legislatively, but to have manifestations of my work very here right on the ground in my congressional district and constituents. There's just been such an outpouring of people and the beautiful things they say, and I think, who are they describing? But naming this and that after me, and it's to say that it's been a rich experience doesn't even that just barely scratches the surface. It really does. Many bills in healthcare, in pediatric healthcare. Children are not little adults. But when it comes to drugs for pediatric application, when it comes to clinical trials for in the pediatric area, we've had a lot of missing links, and I've been able to fill those gaps. So you need to know something. a tape of my mother's is playing as I'm speaking to you.
Oh,
And she always said, don't talk about yourself. So it's a little hard for me. I guess I could tell you more, but I think the tape is weighing in on me. Yeah, and most people, not that they're going to sit up at night and think about this, but the majority of the time that I've served in the Congress over the 32 years, I've been served in the minority, not the majority. So if anyone says, well, I'm in the minority, I can't get that much done, I've got news for them.
yeah. Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, thank you for being with us. We're going to do a show devoted just to you, so we hope to have you on before you officially leave.
I better throw my mother's tape away.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
You know what, gentlemen, it's wonderful to be with you.
thank
We've known each other for a long time, and I cherish that. So, thank you for doing this, and to focus on San Mateo County. We love San Mateo County. It is it's a star in the in that whole spectrum of counties in California. That's for sure. So, thank you.
well, you've been a model public servant, and you are getting a lot of justifiable praise for all you've accomplished. But
So
what
nice.
I want to finish on is there's a brand of retail politics that you have demonstrated that most people just don't seem to fully understand how to do, which is, and the tip off is that nobody calls you Congresswoman, nobody calls you Congresswoman Eshoo. They all call you Anna.
Anna, yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Good night.
Right.
You were watching a live stream of the game on election night 2024. A couple of guys are sitting around waiting for us to get to them, and we're happy to have them here. We're going to bring all three of them on at once. Charles Stone, former Belmont City Council member, Jim Hartnett, former Redwood City Council member and former CEO of SamTrans and Caltrain, and then Don Cecil, who's not a former anything. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us, and thank you for your patience as we weaved our way through our list of guests. Let's start with you, Jim. Any initial impressions about the vote in San Mateo County, the local elections? What's happened? How things turned out?
Mark,
Jim, let me ask again. Any thoughts about how the election has gone in San Mateo County? Who's won, who's lost, and what sort of impressions you're left with?
well, I'd like to take a riff off what Supervisor-elect Jackie Speier talked about, and how she was motivated to run in part because she thought the ward was going too far to the left. And, as we know, she's a progressive. And so when she says something's going too far to the left, I think we should take note. So I think her clear election and Lisa Gauthier's election to replace Warren Slocum are evidence that I think the voters are looking for the board to be a little bit more in the middle, but even more than that, to be what I would call practical. And I think that's the big task for the board now, is to be practical. And they've got a lot of issues they've got to deal with, including the mess that's going on in the sheriff's office. And that's a major distraction, which I think, as Supervisor Mueller said, report may be coming out on that in a couple of weeks. And that's something that they're going to have to attend to quickly. And I think we've seen in the Redwood City election, we have two contested races. One incumbent is losing, and another person who was on the council is losing and is really a quasi incumbent in her district. Now, both of those races are close. The candidates are separated by each of them by less than 70 votes, so that could change. But if it doesn't change, it's also evidence that the voters in the district were looking for people to be practical rather than progressive.
Charles, Tom, same question to you.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Charles, same question to you.
I'm still sort of processing the national results and thinking locally as well. I think to borrow also from someone earlier, Supervisor Mueller, we're seeing the pendulum swing back the other way. The identity politics, the very extremist left-wing views that we've seen from, nationally from members of the squad and more locally from certain local council candidates and supervisory candidates that were somewhat successful for a while, I think are being repudiated, both nationally and locally. I think that Jim was eloquent in pointing out that we need to be more focused on being reasonable and pragmatic, which is what San Mateo County has been known for a long time. And we've seen a shift on the board away from that over the last few years. Locally, we're also seeing in Belmont, which obviously has a special place in my heart and I pay close attention to. In District 4, we're seeing Tom McCune ahead of Davina Hurt. Davina is the more progressive of the two candidates. Both of them are good friends. I have tremendous respect for them both. Davina's taken some really courageous stands on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Board and the California Air Resources Board in terms of decarbonization. But, voters in San Mateo County may or may not align with those viewpoints and the idea that they will not have access to a gas-powered heater or a gas-powered stove is still something that they're processing. And so, I think you guys were right to comment on the fact that there's been some independent expenditure money. My thought is that this is another example of kind of seeing the pendulum swing back the other way.
Don? Any thoughts from you? Similar question.
Well, Mark, I'm happy to report that the incumbents in the Las Lomitas Elementary School District are surviving the teacher strike and thriving in the early returns. Let me take this perspective. Unlike the lack of diversity on this panel, as I look at the five of us, there's still great diversity, whether you're a progressive, whether you're a moderate, even, if you're maybe a little bit to the right of that. We have very, very diverse candidates getting elected up and down this county. And that's a great thing. It's reflective of the demographics of the county. I want to go back to what we talked about before. I find it very interesting comparing Redwood City and South San Francisco, where you've got, as Jim pointed out, essentially almost two incumbents running behind two challengers, whereas you have the flip in South San Francisco where the two incumbents are solidly beating their challengers. And in South San Francisco, you had two Filipino candidates. James Coleman is Chinese and Arvind Sharma is Indian. And I can't think of anything that's more diverse than that collection of four candidates. And even in the case of Lizette Espinoza-Garnica, Diana Reddy, Marcela Padilla, and Isabella Chu, there's great diversity there as well. And so is it the progressive? Is it the well-run campaign? Is it the well-funded campaign? Is it the independent expenditures? I think it's a combination of all these things, but it's interesting in my mind to look at those two cities and those specific four races and how they're shaping up. The venerable Jennifer Blanco is not being reelected right now to the San Bruno Park Elementary School District. And that has me surprised. Then you've got Jocelyn Manalo, who is 50% of the vote in her three-way race in the city of Daly City. That really bodes well for her, potential interest in being a member of the Board of Supervisors. And I'm glad to see Ruben Holliber is getting elected to the Millbrae City Council. So there's at least two people who will serve there in January that have been on that council before.
Let me ask all of you. It's a unique group to have. With all the political maneuvering and all of that, the county faces some very serious problems. One of which is something you've all been involved with, which is the future of Caltrain. Beyond that, the future of BART. We've got a serious situation out there. Where do you see all this going? Jim, I'll start with you.
Well, it's a tough one. It's the challenge for Cal.
Uh-oh.
I think we may have. Oh, there he is.
Yeah. Sorry. The challenge for Caltrain is before the pandemic, it was by an independent study determined to be the most efficiently run commuter rail system in the country, and at the time it was the 7th largest commuter rail in the country. The pandemic knocked the ridership out. Ridership is revenue, and revenue is way down, and it's not going to recover to cover the ongoing operation. So within 2 years, it's going to suffer a massive deficit. Despite the fact that a few years back, a 3-county tax was passed to support it. But at the same time, BART is going to look to suck everybody's tax coffers dry to support it in its massive, massive deficits. And so the discussion of a regional tax measure to help BART, to help Muni, to help Caltrain are very difficult because some of the regional leaders want San Mateo County in particular to be what's called a donor county, meaning that we get taxed and not get back much of what we generated. So it's a tough one. And I think it gets back to San Mateo County's got to exercise practical, determined leadership, not just from the transit boards, but at the Board of Supervisors and others have to step up to help save Caltrain, but in order to do that, are likely going to have to work in a regional way to do that, and it's going to be tough.
Charles?
I echo everything Jim said, and I also want to give Jim a shout out for making Caltrain the success that it was, especially during the pandemic. We worked hard to pass a revenue measure 3-county wide in the face of some shenanigans from San Francisco and Santa Clara County that were really reprehensible. But the entire time we had the debate and the discussion, we were very clear that that measure was not going to be enough to pay for a fully electrified Caltrain. Well, now here we are with a fully electrified Caltrain. And ironically, instead of looking for solutions to the revenue problem deeply, Caltrain is looking at taking on additional costs in terms of separate employees, separate space for the first time from SamTrans, the managing agency. And that just kind of baffles me completely. Why would anyone with a sound sense of fiscal stewardship be looking to take on additional costs when you can't even pay for your service 3 or 4 years out? And, you know, there's a chance that San Francisco commercial comes back and jobs come back in person. I think there's more and more of a movement to that. And we can't lose the transportation spine of the peninsula. It's too important. So I guess, you know, I'm hoping that some responsible adults in the room start thinking about how revenue can be saved and increased. And instead of looking at ways to further increase costs and separate from a managing agency that quite frankly did an exemplary job of running Caltrain for the entire time it's existed. And, you know, I know that all 4 of you know, I don't know how many other people know, that San Mateo County has already supported BART quite a bit in different ways over the years. And so the idea that we would be asked to give up our local funds that we worked hard to convince voters to approve, and we promised them would stay here in San Mateo County to help sponsor BART or other failing transit properties around the Bay Area is a really hard pill for me, and I think San Mateo County voters to swallow. Luckily, if I understand correctly, I've seen the most recent polling data, and I don't think that regional transit measure is headed anywhere fast.
Don, and by the way, I should point out that the Caltrain ridership dropped off after I left. Don, you work closely with SamCETA, maybe the most prominent non-governmental organization in the county. And a lot of the underlying issue that is being talked about here is how does San Mateo County assert itself on a regional level? I mean, one of the advantages of not having a dominant city is that there's a long history of the cities having to cooperate and collaborate to get anything done. But as Jim has pointed out in other contexts, there's no mayor of San Mateo County. So how critical looking forward, you've got a board of supervisors with certainly 3 brand new members who are still in their first term, 4 if you want to count Jackie Speier, although he certainly knows how to operate at a regional level. You've got a number of new council members, many of whom have come to power in a balkanized environment where much of what they focus on are the parochial issues of their district. So how does San Mateo County succeed in asserting itself? And are we in a position? Are we poised for that to happen?
We're going to go deep down the rabbit hole on this one. Mark, I think that the governance process, which was the Caltrain process that Charles alluded to, showed San Mateo County it's got to stick together if it's going to be fighting with San Francisco to the north, Santa Clara to the south, and fighting is probably a strong word, but I think San Mateo County is collectively taken for granted a lot. And the governance process with Caltrain and Measure R taught us a lot about sticking together. I have watched the MTC regional measure process, and it has been very frustrating. And I think that right now, San Mateo County is very united at the Board of Supervisors level, our MTC commissioners, the boards of SamTrans, the TA, those from those San Mateo County members who serve on Caltrain. And I would sum it up as this. If it's good enough for Santa Clara County to not be a part of the regional measure, then why is it not good enough for San Mateo County? And, you just got to continue to push back and ask for, the lunacy to stop in terms of what's being proposed and re-proposed. And I think there is a solution, but it's not in front of us right now. And it's probably a solution that may not include a regional measure, but each county agreeing to its portion of the invoice and then finding a way to pay it.
Is there we've been talking about all night progressive versus establishment or / moderate. It's a tough label to come up with in this county because most elected officials are actually pretty far on the left, especially when compared to the rest of the country. But you see the election of Lisa Gauthier against somebody who was clearly intent to be a sort of hard-charging progressive. We still don't know for sure what's happening in Redwood City, but it looks like 2 progressives may well lose there. Certainly one of them is an incumbent who is self-described socialist. Is there a clear message emerging, or is this, let's start with you, Don, is this just the county's politics sorting itself out as it moves into a new era?
I think, Mark, let me start with the fact that I think the current returns have turned out at about 42% in San Mateo County. Right. We're going to expect that turnout to be 75, 80, 85%. There are tens of thousands of ballots that remain to be counted. And we've seen results on election night that remain the same and that completely turn themselves around. So I think let's start with that. What we see tonight may not be what we see in 2 weeks because there are ballots that got mailed today that can arrive as late as this Friday and still be counted. I also think anyone who puts their name on the ballot and runs for office should be applauded because not a lot of people step up to do that. I think to myself, why would anyone want to subject themselves to what we know is the torture of a campaign and the potential backlash and criticisms and negativity? So anybody who ran in this election cycle, my hat is off to them. I don't know that I'm ready to say this is a backlash to progressivism or it's a move to the right. Again, I think in a district-based election system, and even in our smaller cities that haven't gone to districts, how much money have you raised? Who endorses you? How good is your direct mail? How sophisticated is your digital advertising? Are you making phone calls and knocking on doors? I think the campaign element of it still matters a lot. but certainly there can be some candidates that are just too progressive for the people that they represent, and they have done things that have risen to the level of awareness in voters' minds, and they think, I want to try something different.
Jim.
We've seen, we talked about what's happened with Caltrain and the governance change there. Sam Liccardo looks like he may be the next congressman. He's a good guy, but he was mayor of San Jose. Are we in danger here of becoming marginalized even further than we are today?
I think, that's a great question. I had a fair amount of dealings with Mayor Sam during his term over a variety of issues, but particularly transportation and the governance and the tax related to Caltrain. I am hopeful that the fact that he was embraced after the primary by a number of San Mateo County officials, including, for example, Supervisor Mueller, and he was shown a different side of San Mateo County than perhaps he had seen or appreciated before, that he might become more, what I would call more balanced in his view of San Mateo County and its proper role in the region. There's work to do in order to make sure that he has that perspective, but I think we have to approach it with a positive attitude and call the question with him when it's appropriate. It's clear that he's going to be an influencer, as is Kevin Mullin, as the congressman who has most of San Mateo County. And influencers, even though they can't directly affect a decision, can certainly affect them. And so it would be better to have Sam on our side than not. But it also is why we all have to step up and work together in order to protect the interest of San Mateo County, which has protected the interest of Caltrain for its whole life.
Charles, your thoughts?
So there are a couple questions asked. I want to note that Dawn is absolutely right, at least based on my observations in San Mateo County over the last several cycles. The later voters tend to vote more progressive. So it is possible that things can change. But there are a number of races where it looks like they're not going to change. And one of them is San Bruno, where Marty Medina was definitely the more progressive candidate, and the establishment candidate was Rico Medina, who's out in front. I wanted to note that. In terms of Mayor Liccardo, now Congressman Liccardo, and how that's all going to play out, I think going back to a question a few questions ago that I didn't get to chime in on, we need strong leadership for San Mateo County. We need people who are not afraid to speak up for San Mateo County. And I think with this new Board of Supervisors, we're going to see that. You have incredibly formidable people like former Congresswoman Jackie Speier, who are not afraid to speak their mind, who understand the transit game very well, and who will stand up for San Mateo County in those discussions. I trust Lisa Gauthier and Supervisor Mueller to do that as well. And I think that's going to make a difference because we haven't quite had that. There's been a kind of a vacuum over the last couple of years in terms of that strong, vociferous leadership and the willingness to stand up to San Francisco and Santa Clara County and the rest of the region and not just argue, but explain why it's unfair for us to be treated this way and everything, the context and the history of how San Mateo County saved Caltrain in the first place and candidly hasn't been ever paid back what it should have been, although we were successful in getting, I think, $32 million or something a few years back. It's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. The electrified Caltrain is remarkable. I would hate to see it go to reduced service. I would hate to see any more infighting. And it's my hope that the folks from San Mateo County and San Francisco, Santa Clara County can kind of move past all this and think about what's best for the transit users and the region. which in my humble opinion is SamTrans continuing to be the managing agent of Caltrain and playing a very important role in doing that and minimizing the costs of having outside employees and a separate structure beyond what's already been done. That's probably a little too inside baseball for everybody except the 5 of us, but sorry.
Well, we're going to step back and take a larger view. We're going to be joined now by Melissa Michelson, the political science professor from Menlo College, who's been spending a good chunk of her evening weeping, wailing, and rending garments on KTVU. We haven't talked much with you guys about the presidential race, but I would imagine there are a lot of people who are not very happy. I was just looking at the map, and there's still a way forward for Kamala Harris to pull it out, but a lot of things have to break her way very late in the evening.
Things haven't been breaking her way. She's underperforming where she needed to be overperforming. For about 5 hours now, the results have not been looking good for Vice President Harris. And with a couple of the swing states already called, it's really not looking very good. And I think, while of course it's not over till every vote is counted, there would have to be a really weird switch in directions for the remaining swing states to go Kamala Harris's way. So I don't want to tell everybody to give up quite yet, because we want to wait for all the votes to be counted. But she's underperforming Biden compared to 4 years ago, and it's not looking good.
Let me throw this question out to the group, and how much of an outlier has California become? Is it just a different place now than the rest of the country?
I'll take that. I think when we allow ourselves to be portrayed as a progressive bastion in an incredibly liberal state, we aren't being truthful. Think about it. We weren't the first state to legalize recreational marijuana. We weren't the first state to legalize gay marriage. We still have the death penalty. There are 2 or 3 Californias, as everyone on this call knows. And so I don't think we're as different from the nation in a number of ways as we're portrayed to be. And I think it actually hurts and lends to the divisiveness when we allow ourselves to be portrayed that way. Are we more liberal? Are we more progressive on a number of issues? Absolutely. But California is not, writ large, the way that it's portrayed in the media, just like San Francisco is not the Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome that it's portrayed to be on Fox News.
I think we're seeing that in the pushback against some district attorneys that have been seen as going too far to the left. And so when you look at the recall election in Alameda County against Price, when you look at the DA race in LA County, I think you see that. Maybe a few years ago, California progressives got a little bit too high on their own supply in terms of criminal justice reform. And the truth is, California isn't there. And we're also seeing that in the results on Prop 36.
We're going to ask Kevin. We're going to ask Kevin Mullin to now join in too. Congressman Kevin.
There weren't enough people here.
It looks like the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
We need 2 more.
Kevin, we were just talking about the presidential race, and for a good chunk of our lifetimes, California was seen as the state where the future gets started. And right now it looks like we're out of sync with a lot of the rest of the country. What's your take on that thought?
Well, it's good to be with all of you again. I'm not sure how to answer that question in that, we're seeing a pretty firm backlash against DAs, progressive DAs, the reversion on Prop 47 with the overwhelming passage of Prop 36. California has a reputation of being super progressive. The reality is, crime is always that sort of sleeping giant of California politics. The pendulum does swing back and forth in California. A message is being sent, I think, tonight in some of these Bay Area races when it comes to crime or the perception of the prosecution of certain crimes. I mean, look, at its very foundation, people expect government to protect their public safety and their public health. And the voters of California are sending a pretty firm message tonight. So I don't know how, quote unquote, different California is than the rest of the country. It was, frankly, a little experimental to have a California Democrat, a Bay Area Democrat, at the top of the ticket. It would have been incredible had Kamala Harris been able to pull this off with like 90 days to run a presidential campaign. There's going to be lots of Monday morning quarterbacking on what could have been, what should have been in terms of how this Democratic nomination process played itself out. But look, I'm still processing all of this. The race has not been officially called by many of the networks. Fox News has called it. No surprise there. But I'm still processing what this means. I'm having flashbacks to 2016. Right before we came on the air on the game, on the election coverage in 2016, we found out that Donald Trump had won Pennsylvania. And here we are again, sort of living through this. I'm a little more prepared this time for it, given the closeness of the polls. But I'm going to be processing for the next few weeks here on what this means for our country, what this means for the House. I'm hoping that I'm hearing some positive things about the House being Democratic to provide some balance. But it doesn't feel like the country I grew up in. I don't quite know how to find the words at what I'm seeing from large swaths of the country, putting this individual potentially back in the Oval Office and the damage that he could do. I just know that many of us in the Democratic Party are ready to fight like hell for our democracy and for our country, for the republic as we've known it. And we're not going to lay down regardless of what ultimately happens tonight.
Jim,
Evan, you've talked about when we had you on the show earlier, and you talked about what a great thing it would be to have Kamala Harris for the Bay Area. We're now looking at the other side of the coin. The Bay Area is not Donald Trump's favorite place in the world. And a lot of the issues that we're dealing with, we need federal support. How worried are all of you that we're going to be punished? And it's going to be harder to get transportation dollars. It's going to be harder to get other dollars that we need here in the Bay Area and throughout California.
Well, Bob, my concern is much larger than that. We live in a state that consistently needs FEMA emergency aid.
Right. Yes.
And I hope that I'm wrong, but based on things that former President Trump has said publicly, I feel like there's a chance he may either be slow with or not provide that aid. Say we have another, cataclysmic, apocalyptic fire season next year. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that doesn't happen. That would be a pretty stark contrast to everything that's happened in the history of this country. But, before we even talk about transit dollars, I got to think about if the state's on fire, are we going to get FEMA aid?
Yeah.
Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I know people say, and it's probably true, listen to what Trump says because that's what he's going to do. And we use that, we talk about that in particular when it's things that we think are outrageous. I'm not optimistic that he will be fair and balanced with California, but I think we have to approach it in a hopeful manner, because we are a great tax generator for the United States government, and we're important to the entire U.S. economy. And I think we always have to keep making that case of how important we are to the economic vitality of the entire country. And we can only hope that there will be some fair and balanced people at various levels of the administration. I do think, unfortunately, the Trump win is going to be great for lawyers once again, because there will be lawsuits filed right and left over whatever Trump does, that's not authorized expressly by congressional legislation. But that's not good for the country. It's not good for Democratic administrations and state governments to have to do that. It wasn't great for the country for the Republican state attorney generals to be suing the federal government. It's not the right way to run a public business, but it is where we are now.
If I could just jump in on that, it might not be ideal and it might not be the way we want the country to run, but to pick up on what Kevin was saying, it is one of the ways in which we can push back against what looks like is going to be another Trump administration. And when Trump was in office previously, the California state government and Attorney General Javier Becerra filed over 100 lawsuits against the Trump administration and was able to push back against and delay and sometimes even stop, in cooperation with other attorney generals around the country, the things that the Trump administration was going to do. And while the Trump administration might be more efficient this time and might have a better grip on the rules this time, I think there's still going to be a huge role to be played through the legal system and pushing back by state attorneys generals, filing those lawsuits and trying to fight for the rights of people in this country whose rights and lives will be under attack under a new Trump administration. And so that is, an important role for California to play.
Sean, your thoughts. Give us your final thoughts on tonight.
I mean, listen, the man is a criminal and he's an animal, and we know exactly what is coming. And, the only diversity I can add to the fact that I'm a white man is that I'm a gay man married to my husband. And I'm not really, do I fear Trump? I'm not sure I fear Trump. I'm girding for what is coming because I remember what those 4 years were like. What I am fearful of is the people that I either know or know of who literally are fearful that they are going to be deported, that they will be attacked, that this climate of indiscriminate racism is just going to get worse. And that is what my biggest concern is. We're so far apart already, and this man and the people who support him and the 2025 bigots and racists are really going to double down. And, it's going to take a lot of people who look like us to fight back for the people who, are just trying to not be victimized.
I'll add to that there's a real concern I have about another group, which is women and my two daughters. And I do believe what former President Trump says and what his supporters say. And I'm petrified that a national abortion ban is going to be attempted. I don't know what the court does with that anymore. At one time, I knew what the court would have done with that. I can't say anymore with any certainty. And beyond that, I think we may see an attempt to make the Plan B pill nationally illegal. And I think the people who look like us, most of us on this call, are going to have to be strong allies and fight that like hell as well. Because all of these groups, and it's fascinating to me because, as a law student, I had a professor in 2000 after the Bush-Gore election point out that we had seen a huge expansion of rights in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s under the Supreme Court. And maybe if we're being intellectually honest, the decisions weren't rationalized legally as well as they should have been. The penumbra of rights, for instance, it certainly wasn't a strict constructionist approach. And he cautioned us that in our lifetime, we might see the right to abortion rolled back. And we didn't think it was possible. But he said, you may see in your lifetime the pendulum swing all the way back and an attempt to unwind things like Griswold versus Connecticut, the right to contraception. And I think we're in danger of entering that territory. Democrats are going to have to take a very hard look in the mirror and figure out how we try to take the Senate back in 2026 and how we win the presidency in 2028. Or else I think his prediction's going to come true, and we're going to see this vast expansion of rights that we saw in the second half of the 20th century completely reduced.
It is interesting. In the last year or so, it seems like the Trump supporters have been emboldened. That 4 years ago, very few of them were publicly willing to state their position, hang up a banner. And I think one of the things that has happened is that they feel bolder. They feel like they're on the winning tide. Kevin, we're going to give you the last word tonight. And I want to pose the question this way. I don't think anybody, certainly not you, goes into office with the agenda of what can I stop people from doing. But in many ways, won't that really be the central role now of the Democratic Party in the House is what can we just block from happening rather than what initiatives can we take?
Look, no question about it. We're going to fight like hell. I certainly hope it's with control of the gavels and Speaker Hakeem Jeffries. It is quite possible the people of this country, maybe unknowingly, voted for balance in our government and checks and balances. I have known for a while here that this was a distinct possibility that a House Democratic majority would be the check, the only check on a second President Trump administration. And look, this is a guy who appeals to the darkest angels of our nature. This is a dark time, potentially here in American politics over the next 4 years, next 2 years, next 4 years. But it's quite possible we get the House majority. It's going to be a slim majority if that comes to pass. That would be enormously helpful to act as a check on Trumpism, the movement that has taken hold in the House. We can be a check on that extremism. But look, we are going to fight for the Constitution. We're going to fight for our democracy. We're going to fight for the rule of law. We're going to fight for small d democratic institutions, which have made this country what it is. It's going to be a time to fight and stand up for the people and for the marginalized who are most threatened by a second Trump administration. There will be steel in our spine at that charge. I just want folks watching to know that we are probably going to lose this one, but there's an election in 2026, an election in 2028. The pendulum does swing in the body politic, and we're going to fight like hell to stand up for marginalized communities and everyday Americans because our country is better than this. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Congressman Kevin Mullin, Don Cecil, Melissa Michelson, Charles Stone, Jim Hartnett, thank you for helping us wrap up this evening's live stream of election 2024. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. And we're going to wrap up the show now. I think we're going to run results one more time, maybe. I want to make a point of thanking Frank Bravo for being our herding all the cats in this effort. I'm Mark Simon.
I'm Bob Marks. I also want to thank Frank. He's a true gentleman. He's a real professional. And without him, none of this would be happening.
Yeah,
Mark and I would be sitting at a table somewhere yelling at each other. So, Frank, I salute you and thanks for everything that you've done.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. Listening to you guys and talk to all the great guests we've had on tonight. The two things I took away, I made little notes here. Mark Simon talking about a phone booth. So we're going to have to mention that to anybody who's under the age of, 30. And then Julie's quote of craptastic night. Those were the two things that stuck out in my head as we listened to this and as I watched from this side, enjoying the conversation, hearing all the great guests we've had on tonight. So yeah, we can run through the results. Do you want to talk through them or just run them through?
Let me just wrap up and then we'll run the results. And Bob can go to the bathroom. We have had an incredible lineup of guests, and it's a tribute to their civic mindedness that they all made themselves available. It was tough sometimes because we had a lot of people sort of backed up, but we sure appreciate all the people who chose to come on with us. Congressman Kevin Mullin, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, Supervisor-elect Jackie Speier, Supervisor-elect Lisa Gauthier, just to mention a few. There's a lot to be worried about, but you know, the sun will come up tomorrow and we'll figure out what to do. Thank you to the San Mateo Daily Journal, the Almanac, and Redwood City Pulse for sponsoring us. Thanks again to Frank, and thank you, whoever's out there, for watching. And we'll be back soon with another edition of The Game. So good night.